I waited 18 years for a game to launch. Technically, I waited one lifetime and then died, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. The last thing I remembered was the final battle against the Skrulls. Green-skinned aliens, burning cities, humanity down to its last trench. I was a mid-tier mage holding a line that could not be held, and then a plasma lance turned me into a very brief firework. Lights out. Thanks for playing. Then I opened my eyes in my crappy rented room in Donghai City, 23 years old again, 3 days before the game called Evolution went live. 3 days before the whole nightmare officially started. I sat up so fast I headbutted my own bookshelf. Checked my hands. 23. No scars. Check my phone. The date glowed at me like a second chance with a countdown on it. Check the news. Nothing. No aliens, no panic, a celebrity divorce trending. The world still innocent, still asleep, still 3 days from the knock on the door. I laughed once, cried a little, ate everything in my fridge, and started writing lists. Because here's the thing nobody knew yet. Evolution wasn't a game. It was a weapons program. A high-level civilization called the Singers had noticed the Skrulls filing paperwork to invade our planet, and their idea of humanitarian aid was dropping a VR game on us. Level up in the game, and at level 50, your power starts leaking into reality. Fireballs. Real ones. From your actual human hands. In my past life, I figured that out too late. I started slow, leveled slow, spent the war watching better players become legends while I died in a ditch. This time, I had a century of walkthrough in my head. Every hidden quest, every boss weakness, every traitor's face, and I had one more thing. I knew where the money was. See, Evolution ran on psionic coins, and psionic coins came from psionic energy, and psionic energy came from spring eyes, actual geysers of spirit power punching up through the planet's crust after 10,000 years of drought. The Skrulls were coming specifically to strap collectors onto those geysers and milk our world dry. The biggest one, the #1 spring eye on the entire planet, was going to erupt under Yunlu Mountain in 2 days. In my past life, the Skrulls got it. Their fleet parked on top of it and drank our planet like a juice box. So I emptied my savings. All of it. Bought the game helmet, 30,000 yuan. The clerk looked at my bank notification and asked if I was sure. Sir, I have never been more sure of a purchase in 2 lifetimes. Then I bought hiking boots, a sleeping bag, and a bus ticket to Yunlu Mountain. The helmet was the trick. The thing charged itself on ambient psionic energy and converted it into game currency at a rate the designers had clearly never stress tested, because no ordinary place on our starving planet had enough energy to matter. A normal player might scrape 100 points a day off city air. The designers never imagined someone would put the helmet directly on the faucet. I hiked up in the dark, found the exact rock I remembered from a classified report I'd read as a dying man, lay down, put the helmet on my chest, and waited. It was cold. A bird judged me from a branch for 2 hours. I rehearsed my future in my head like a speech. At 3 a.m., the mountain coughed. The ground shivered, once, like something enormous turning over in its sleep. Then the slope 40 meters away split, and the planet exhaled a column of milky white light that went up past the clouds and turned the whole night the color of the inside of a pearl. 10,000 years of drought, ending in front of one man and one judgmental bird. My helmet started drinking it like a college freshman at an open bar. The counter spun so fast the digits blurred. 1 million, 50 million, 900 million. I lay on my back under a pillar of the world's returning magic, watching numbers climb, laughing alone on a mountain like a lunatic, which, to be fair to the bird, I was. By dawn, the spring eye was a dead hole in the ground, and my account balance read 10 billion psionic points. 10 billion. The largest energy deposit on the planet, and I'd strip-mined it with consumer electronics before the invoice even arrived. 2 days later, a Skrull scout ship descended on Yunlu Mountain with all the swagger of a landlord coming to collect rent, and found a dry well. I watched the news footage of it circling in confusion and toasted my instant noodles at the screen. Sorry guys, first come, first served. Then the servers opened, and I logged in. Character creation is where most players spend an hour agonizing. I spent 9 minutes. Class, mage, because I'd played one for a decade and knew every spell like an old grudge. Name, vengeance. A little dramatic, sure, but I had a list of people this name was aimed at, and every entry on it deserved drama. Then the system converted my 10 billion points into 10 billion coins. The exchange animation ran for a comedically long time, actual seconds of coins pouring, and the little gotcha tab in the corner started glowing at me. The Bloodline Lottery. 200 coins a pull, and in my past life, whales pulled 10,000 times and got a commemorative keychain. I pulled with the serenity of a man whose wallet was a geological formation. Greens, blues, a purple that would have made anyone else scream. More greens. Somewhere past pull 200, the screen went gold, then past gold, into a color I'd only seen in Legends, and the interface itself seemed to hesitate, like a lottery machine double-checking its own math. Legendary Star Bloodline. 2 effects. First, my in-game power could materialize in reality from level 1, not level 50, level 1. While the rest of humanity ground their way toward the threshold, I'd be walking around Earth as a live wire from day 1. Second, a skill called Star Pointing Hand, which let me pay coins to upgrade the quality of any item or spell. Money, converted directly into power, no middleman. A bloodline built for exactly one kind of player, the kind holding a stolen geyser. Last step, appearance. The game scanned my face, and I'll be honest, my face is a problem. It attracts attention. In my past life, it attracted an entire sales career of wealthy female clients I'd rather forget. So I grabbed the sliders and dragged my in-game handsomeness down 40% into the safe zone of aggressively average. Life lesson: beauty is a liability. A war criminal needs a forgettable face. I spawned in Novice Village number 6, Nolan Village, a sunny little map of thatched roofs and players punching chickens. And I went shopping. Starter staff upgraded to rare. Starter robe, rare. Magic missile, my sad little level 0 pea shooter, rare. Each upgrade cost more than most players would earn in a month, and I bought them the way other people buy gum. The first NPC to learn what I was carrying was old magician Fimble, the village spell trainer, a wizened man whose default expression said every apprentice was a personal insult. Advanced spells, he sniffed, not looking up from his desk. Come back when you can afford the ink on the scroll, boy. I opened my coin purse to check my balance. Just checking, casually, angling it, perhaps, a little toward the light. The glow of 10 digits reflected off his face. I watched 40 years of professional contempt evaporate in real time. Watched his eyes count the zeros twice. Watched his spine bend into a bow so smooth it had to be a hidden racial ability. Esteemed scholar. He said it like 2 separate prayers. Please, sit. Tea? I have tea. I have chairs. Both chairs are yours. Suddenly, there was a hidden errand available, a silver snake gallbladder he urgently needed for research, and would I be so kind, and had he mentioned I had a scholar's brow, truly the brow of an academy man. I would be so kind. Because I already knew where that humble gallbladder errand ended, at Chain Lightning, and at an invitation letter to something called the Scholar Sanctuary, both worth more than this entire village and the hill it sat on. Reading the walkthrough before it's written, there's no drug like it. Out in the boar fields, I met my first familiar faces. A father-daughter duo, player names Crystal Dew and Crystal Shade, taking turns poking a level 3 boar that clearly considered them a mild weather event. In my past life, Crystal Shade became a decorated soldier. Right now, she was apologizing to her father for aggroing a second boar. The second boar came at me. I one-shotted it without breaking stride. Then, since everyone was already staring, the first one. Then the boar leader wandered over, a boss with a bristling red name and a health bar meant for a raid group, and my upgraded magic missile deleted it like a typo. Silence. 2 players. 1 smoking crater with tusks. How, said Crystal Shade in the flat voice of a person recalculating reality, did you do that? I gave them the excuse I'd prepared for exactly this situation, the excuse I would go on to use so many times it deserved its own trademark and a legal team. A high-level NPC passed by earlier and put a buff on me. No idea why. Lucky, right? Oh, they said. Nice. There is no such buff in this game. There has never been such a buff. In the entire history of the server, across millions of players and hundreds of my uses of this sentence, not one person ever checked. Trouble found me by lunchtime, wearing matching guild tags. A recruiter squad from the Zhantian Guild, all smiles, inviting the mysterious boar-deleting mage for a friendly chat. I looked at their guild name and my blood went about 4 degrees colder. Zhantian's leader called himself Skybreaker Blade. In this life, he was a rising star, charismatic, talented, generous with subordinates. In my past life, he was the man who sold out the East China Sea defense line, traded the coordinates of humanity's coastal artillery to the Skrulls for a promise of survival. 2 million people died in one night because of that man, and he didn't even get his payment because the universe said, lol, no deals with cockroaches. I declined the invitation politely. Then I added a private note to my to-do list. This guild does not get to grow. The sheep came first though. Hillside Sheep Zone, goat leader boss, a fluffy white monster with a signature move called Leap Stomp that I absolutely remembered and absolutely mistimed anyway. The stomp caught me mid-cast and my health bar dropped to 12 points. 12 out of hundreds. I stood in the crater of my own hubris, drank a potion with shaking hands, and killed that goat with the focused hatred of a man who almost got obituaried by livestock. It dropped 2 skill scrolls, Deadly Strike and Ice Shield, plus a pile of blues. I kept Ice Shield and auctioned the rest in the village square, live, standing on a crate, calling lots like a fish market. That auction broke the server's brain. Day 2 of the game, and some no-name mage was selling boss loot by the armful, while everyone else was proud of their first pair of pants. Opening bids started timid and went feral in minutes. Players sprinting off to borrow coins from strangers, the crowd packing so thick that people climb fences for sightlines, and one enterprising warrior sold his fence spot to a latecomer. Secondary markets forming around my primary market. Beautiful, organic, disgusting capitalism. Day 2. Forum threads sprouted like weeds before I'd counted the take. Who is vengeance? What is vengeance? The conspiracy boards had me pegged as a dev account, a foreign intelligence asset, and a viral marketing stunt, sometimes all 3 in the same post, with diagrams. Perfect. Attention was a currency too, and I intended to spend it. Meanwhile, over in Novice Village number 2, a different business model was flourishing. The Emperor Blood Guild, led by a rich kid whose player name was Sovereign Gore Reaper, had monopolized the leveling zones and was now eyeing a franchise opportunity. Their plan had the elegance of a brick. Send a squad to my village, pretend to be the Zhantian Guild, and charge every player 1 coin to walk through the village gate. You heard that right, a toll booth, in a video game. On the road out of the starter town, the squad they sent was led by a guy named Shadow Scale Serpent, and to his credit, he committed to the bit. Zhantian banner, Zhantian catchphrases, 1 coin per head, pay or stay poor forever. A few brave players revolted. The revolt lasted about as long as a sneeze. I strolled up to the gate with my hands in my sleeves. Behind me, 100 players who'd already paid pressed in to watch, on the universal principle that whatever happens next isn't happening to them. 1 coin, said Red Eyes, palm out, bored. Gate tax. Zhantian appreciates your cooperation. Question first, if I pay the coin, do I also get to leave the village? Sure. And if I want to come back in? Another coin. So it's a subscription. He thought about it. Yeah, counteroffer, I said, and opened with chain lightning. What followed wasn't a battle so much as a public service announcement. 100 toll collectors versus 1 mage with rare everything and an ice shield that made their weapons bounce like toddlers hitting a fridge. Lightning forked through their formation in bright family trees, 6 targets a cast, each corpse a conductor for the next. The ones in back tried to run and discovered that chain lightning has range. The ones in front tried to swarm and discovered that ice shield has opinions. 90 seconds. When the dust settled, the gate was decorated with 100 gray corpses, the crowd was chanting, and I was waving them down modestly. No, I'm not that strong. A hidden quest buffed me. Haha, anyone could have done it. The crowd nodded. Somewhere in the respawn queue, 100 men who had very much not been able to do it started typing furious reports to their real employer. Then I went home and did the actually damaging part. I got on the forum and asked, very innocently, why the famous Zhantian Guild was taxing new players at village gates. The forum did what forums do. By midnight, Zhantian's name was a war cron. Skybreaker Blade posted clarifications, denials, screenshots proving his people had been nowhere near Village 6. Nobody read past the headlines. The top comment on his own defense thread was, typical Zhantian, taxing us and gaslighting us. Then I made it art. I added Shadow Scale Serpent as a friend, complimented his toll booth performance as, honestly, the boldest business move of the beta, and over 2 days of buddy chat maneuvered him into a brilliant idea he believed was his own, publicly distancing himself from the scandal. He posted a heartfelt confession titled, Why I Left Zhantian. 2,000 words, a confession from a man who had never spent 1 minute in Zhantian, describing atrocities that had never happened, with the tearful sincerity of a hostage video, including the sentence, I can no longer stay silent about what I saw. He had seen nothing. He had been the thing. Zhantian accused Emperor Blood. Emperor Blood accused Zhantian of framing them. A third guild accused both of colluding for attention. 3 guilds went to war in the comments section, moderators worked in shifts, and I sorted my auction earnings by rarity and slept like a well-fed cat. The silver snakes were next, a valley of them, and grinding there stacked my new trinket nicely. The trinket came from the best hidden quest in the starter region, a chain called Savvy's Tears that most players wouldn't find for months because its early rings were designed by someone who hated joy, repetitive chores, unmarked triggers, an escort mission for, and I cannot stress this enough, firewood. I skipped straight to ring 11 on past life knowledge, walked the firewood with dignity, and at ring 20 met the quest's actual star, a tiny NPC girl named Lily, red dress, teddy bear named Tibbers, the kind of cute that should ship with a warning label, standing alone at the mouth of a cave that had eaten 3 search parties. A bear demon was stalking her. I killed it before it finished its lunge, burned the bushes she solemnly pointed at, 1, 2, 3, her little face very serious about the bushes, and she rewarded her new friend with the Tear of the Goddess, a trinket that grew my mana with every spell cast, forever, no cap. Stack-based items are a religion, and I am devout. And Lily, tiny, polite, bush-burning Lily, remember that in this game, the smaller and sweeter the NPC, the closer you are standing to something that can delete a zip code. This is called foreshadowing, and it has a wingspan. The Snake Valley also finished Fimbul's gallbladder errand, and that's where Zhantian tried again. 5 of their core players, real ones this time, materialized around me in a practiced encirclement, the friendly menace of a debt collection agency. Vengeance, right? Their leaders smiled the way managers smile. Boss wants you in Zhantian. Great terms. Officer rank, resource priority, protection. Protection from what? From, he gestured vaguely at the world. Accidents. Ah, I said, accidents. Chain Lightning is a spell with a long and noble history, and its finest hour was that one. 1 cast. 4 of the 5 dropped where they stood, arranged in a neat arc like a bowling frame, and the stunned 5th man stood in the middle, the last pin after a strike, holding a recruitment contract. Tell your boss, I said, stepping past him, that recruiting me is a salary negotiation, and you're not qualified to discuss the numbers. Then I sent Skybreaker Blade a friend request from the top of the corpse arc, because keeping your enemies on your friends list is free intel. He accepted within a minute, with a friendly note about no hard feelings between big players. Men like him always accept. They always think they're the spider. Somewhere in there, I also spent 2 full hours learning Blink, not practicing it, learning it, from an NPC named Old Blake, whose hidden quest was a repeater. Say the same line of dialogue to him over and over until the game finally admits defeat and gives you a teleport spell. 2 hours, same sentence. I have fought gods with more dignity than I displayed in front of Old Blake's porch. The porch mattered, though. Everything in Nolan Village was about to matter, because a girl who ran the local grocery store was about to drag me into the main plot of the entire continent. Her name was Clara Vance. In this life, when I met her, she was 17, running her sick father's shop, and stubborn in the way that gets people killed or crowned, nothing in between. In my past life, I knew her by a different title, the Saintess of Oran City, the Empire's greatest marshal, a legend other legends told stories about. Right now, her biggest problem was a butler. I was in the shop buying supplies when butler Alistair swept in with 6 servants and the smell of imported soap, employed by the local Baron Sterling, bearing an offer delivered to a 17-year-old over her own counter. The Baron had noticed her, and she would now become the Baron's mistress, and this was to be understood as an honor. "Get out of my shop," Clara said, without raising her voice, one hand already finding the counterknife. The Baron anticipated reluctance. Alistair smiled at the servants. The servants stepped forward to explain the honor. I objected with electricity. 6 servants hit 6 walls. Alistair got the 7th wall personally and a message to carry. The shop was under a scholar's protection now. He crawled off, vowing the Baron would hear of this, which was the plan. But I've never trusted middle management to deliver bad news honestly, so I delivered it myself. Walked to the manor that evening. The gate guards drew steel and became decorations. Guard Captain Miller came down the steps with a 2-hander and a speech and got through neither. And in the study, Baron Sterling rose from his desk with his hands already glowing because, surprise, the fat little tyrant was a level 8 boss and a trained mage. The duel wrecked his study. Firebolt against lightning, his shield against mine, furniture igniting on both wings of the room. And here's the thing about mage duels. When both casters know the same tricks, the fight goes to whoever brought more mana. I'd been stacking mine on a snake farming trinket for 2 weeks. He ran dry mid-incantation, looked at his own empty hands with genuine offense, and my last bolt put him into his bookshelf. The bookshelf, collapsing, buried him in his own account books. And the account books, when I flipped through them while looting, contained neat, dated records of the Baron selling Imperial grain routes to the northern rebels. Treason, notarized by the traitor himself, in triplicate because embezzlers can't help keeping receipts. The kingdom's response arrived in the form of Bronte from the Warriors Guild, who took one look at the evidence, one look at the dead Baron, and pinned 2 medals of honor on me instead of a wanted poster. Clara thanked me the way she did everything, directly. A quick, fierce hug and a slip of paper pressed into my hand, a receipt folded twice. And the moment I touched it, my quest log chimed with golden letters. Main quest, the Saintess of Oran City. The whole continent storyline, starting from a grocery receipt. I looked at the girl restocking shelves like she hadn't just handed me the plot of an era and thought, yeah, that tracks. That's exactly how legends start. Nobody claps. Before the plot, though, I had a debt to collect. 2 debts, actually, and 1 apocalypse to dodge. The apocalypse first. Finishing Lily's quest chain had triggered its epic finale, and the finale had conditions written by a sadist. Within 6 hours, survive 1 attack from the star-forging Dragon King, a level 84 cosmic dragon named Aurelian's Soul. Fail, and the punishment wasn't death. It was a permanent ban, deleted from the one game keeping humanity alive. The designers really said, no pressure. My survival plan was pure village logic. The village chief was secretly a big shot. Big shots protect their villages. Therefore, when the dragon came, I would be standing very close to the village chief. While waiting for a dragon, I handled the debts. Both guilds, Zantian and Emperor Blood, were still squatting in my village, looking for me with the patience of process servers. So I posted a hot tip in world chat from a burner account. Field boss spawning in the village square. Massive loot. First come, first served. Both guilds sprinted there in full force and found only each other. 2 armies, nose to nose, in a space built for a vegetable market. 30 seconds of silence while each side concluded the other had set a trap. Then somebody's pet growled, somebody's archer flinched, and the square became a blender. The forum got its second guild war of the week. I got a rooftop, a bag of jerky, and the purest entertainment money can't buy. 2 enemies billing each other for my invoice. And then the sky tore open, and the petty comedy hour ended. Aurelian's soul didn't land. Landing is for creatures the planet can refuse. He simply was, suddenly, above the square, a serpent of living galaxy with little Lily standing on his head, and every player's interface flashed the same helpful message, run. I pulled a mask on and walked toward the thing everyone else was fleeing. The square emptied around me in screaming spirals. Lily waved down at me from the dragon's head, delighted, and said something to the dragon, and the dragon's attention came down on me like the noon sun through a magnifying glass. Level 84. My level? Mid-teens. My plan? 1 spell and an apology. His claw came down. Not fast. Inevitable, the way weather is. I blinked at the last legal frame, and the claw turned the spot where I'd been standing into a memory with a crater in it. 1 attack survived. Quest chime. All I had to do now was bow to the child, back away, and leave quietly. And I was actually doing it, actually pulling off a polite exit from a cosmic dragon, when some archer up on the aqueduct decided today was her day. Player name, Azure Wyvern. Assessment of the situation, boss event, big health bar, first hit bonus probably. Action taken, drew her bow, took careful aim past 1,000 fleeing players, and shot Lily with a true damage arrow. Lily said ow. The dragon inhaled. The breath that followed removed 3/4 of the village square from the game. Thousands of damage numbers rose into the sky at once, all of them reading 9,999, an entire meadow of them, most belonging to 2 guilds that had conveniently gathered in one place for me. Zhan Tian, deleted. Emperor Blood, deleted. Random bystanders, deleted. And honestly, at some point, a massacre stops being a tragedy and becomes a server event. I escaped on my second blink with my tier of the goddess glowing, freshly promoted to epic by quest completion, and 1 new main quest in my log, the glory of the Wisteria Empire. The dragon left, the crater smoked. Azure Wyvern logged a customer service complaint about unfair boss mechanics. Remember her name, by the way, the Archer. That trigger finger of hers becomes important later, and so does her horrifying luck. The village chief crawled out of the rubble, dusted himself off with suspicious calm for an old man who had just been adjacent to a dragon, and gave me my next task like nothing happened. Kill the Howling Moon Wolf King and bring proof, so he could arrange an audience for me with Princess Sylvie, the princess, from a village chief. I filed that under Things About This Old Man That Don't Add Up, a file that would eventually need its own cabinet. The Wolf King was a problem in the shape of a wall. Level 10 rare boss, 140,000 health, 12 guards, spawning in a monster siege that had triggered early. Technically, fine, entirely because of me. Every player in the village was about to be trampled, and the forum had already scheduled the funeral. I bought my way to a solution. Star pointing hand re-rolled gear until I had a full movement set, 5.8 speed, 29 meters per second on foot. A human being should not corner at that speed. Then I opened a market stall called Rare Shop and casually listed 46 blue items to fund the rerolls, which caused a small riot and 3 marriage proposals from strangers. The plan itself came from, of all people, Crystal Shade. Weeks earlier, she'd offhandedly said the wolves fought stupid near cliffs. Everyone ignored her. I didn't, because in my past life, I'd learned the hard way that quiet soldiers say the most expensive sentences. So, the cliff kill. Step 1. Separate him from his guards, which took an hour of kiting at 29 meters a second, the wolf and I doing laps of the valley like the world's angriest track meet. Step 2. Sell the story. I let him land hits I could have dodged, watched my own health bar sink to numbers that made my palms sweat for real, gasped, stumbled, dragged one leg, wounded prey, his whole species' favorite show. Step 3. The stage. I collapsed 2 meters from the cliff's edge, propped on my staff, wheezing at him, and the Wolf King did what 140,000 health points of Apex Predator has never once had a reason not to do. He gathered his hindquarters and leapt, full spinal crush pounce, all of him airborne, committed, a missile with fur. I blinked at the exact frame his paws left the ground. Physics accepted the handoff. A wolf the size of a bus went over the edge into 500 meters of open air, and his scream on the way down had a note of pure administrative outrage in it, like he intended to file a complaint. I froze his scrambling mid-fall mess with Frost Nova to keep him aerodynamically committed, then followed him down using a leather bag as a parachute, which worked exactly as well as it sounds, and still better than staying topside with 12 orphaned guards. The wolf hit the valley floor and became geography. Loot rained through the gold light. I limped out of a bush I had definitely not landed in on purpose, collected an equipment shower off a corpse-shaped crater, and somewhere far above, an entire village's doom quietly expired without ever learning why. Naturally, the village didn't see the cliff. They saw the siege get cancelled with no explanation, and the forum decided the invisible savior was, wait for it, Zhan Tian, atoning for the toll booth scandal. Skybreaker Blade spent a whole day publicly explaining that his guild had done nothing, saved no one, and deserved no credit, which is the single funniest genre of forum post, the man fighting drowning in unearned praise like it was slander. I hit level 10 first on the entire server. Leaderboard, Vengeance, 10. Eversober, 8. Sovereign Gore Reaper, 8. Frozen Dark Brew, 7. Names that would all matter later, trailing me by a distance I intended to maintain with a checkbook. Level 10 unlocked enhancement paths, so the checkbook came out. Lightning Bolt, upgraded until it paralyzed on every hit. Ice Shield, upgraded to full physical immunity. Blink, upgraded to 2 charges, and my new staff carried a third. 3 blinks. For a mage, blinks are lives. I was now a cat. The main quest turn-in with the village chief was pure village theater. As reward for the Wolf King, he ceremonially granted me the best sword in the village, which was a broken sword, visibly glued, that shocked enemies for 3 seconds, 10 uses total. And the best horse in the village, which turned out to be a mare that belonged to Clara, information the chief had not run past Clara. The mare and I also accidentally triggered a hidden quest called The Centaur's Unrequited Love, and I want to be very clear that I asked 0 follow-up questions. Level 10 dungeons opened, and I picked Amumu's Lament, mostly because I remembered its loot table, and partly because the other two had puzzle bosses that made grown streamers cry. Not that mine was merciful. Boss 1 was a rhythm game. An Azir construct hurling snake-shaped energy blocks in musical patterns, dodge on the beat or eat the bar, and I danced through it with the muscle memory of a man who'd watched 100 guides and finally got to be the guide. Boss 2 was Little Lily again, with Tibbers, and the mechanic was pure designer sadism. Kill the bear, deal 0 damage to the child standing inside the bear's hitbox. 1 splash, 1 stray crit, wipe. Precision surgery with lightning, my least surgical element. And the finale was a boss named Teemo, whose arena was a 480-tile floor of hidden mushrooms. Live Minesweeper. Step wrong, explode. Step right, and Teemo giggles and remines a quadrant. I cleared it on memory, paranoia, and one heart-stopping moment where my remembered safe tile had been patched, apparently out of spite, and only the singed hem of my robe recorded the discovery. This game's designers had exactly 2 moods, kindergarten and Vietnam, and they switched between them without signaling. First level 10 clear on the server, another world announcement. At this point, I'd been announced so many times the sound effect felt like my ringtone, so I leaned into it. I bought a megaphone item, stood in the square, and gave the people 3 headlines. 1. Yes, that was me who killed the Wolf King. Sorry about the mystery. 2. I was founding a guild, the Yellow Turban Army, operating principle equivalent exchange. You farm for me, I overpay you, no cult stuff, probably. 3. Every dungeon quiz answer the community had been dying over, all 800 plus, posted free tonight. The last one did it. You can buy a player's time, but post an answer bank and you own his heart. Applications flooded in. Shadowscale Serpent joined and immediately started calling me boss. Azure Wyvern joined, unrepentant about the dragon incident, claiming her arrow had tested the boss's mechanics for everyone. The Yellow Turban Army was born with a forum meme for a name and an answer key for a founding document. I'd also, some weeks earlier, performed my one true public service. After my first dungeon clear put a world announcement over the server, I'd bought a megaphone item, stood on a fence, and told a few thousand strangers the truth wrapped in a lie, that I'd heard from an NPC that level 50 came with a reward worth a school district apartment. The country's entire property-anxious population translated that instantly into the only language we all share. The leveling craze that followed did more for humanity's future combat readiness than any government program. Weibo mocked me for a week as the school district mage. 10,000 friend requests froze my interface solid. I regret nothing. They needed to grind, and no one grinds for the survival of the species. They grind for real estate. And I'd tested the thing that made all of it matter. Alone in my rented room, offline, I'd raised my hand, thought about the village chief's gold quality staff, and it had appeared in my grip, solid, humming, real. One test bolt later, my wall had a smoking hole, my deposit was gone, and the wall between worlds officially had my handprints on it. Level 5, and the game was already leaking into reality through me. Which mattered, because while the guild grew in the game, my other life got busier at night. Because the Skrulls hadn't waited politely for their invasion date, their advanced teams were already here, and their favorite tool was ghosts. Actual ghosts, spirits stirred up and weaponized, possessing people, causing accidents, softening the world up before the fleet arrived. And the only person on the planet who could see them and hit them was a level 5 mage with materialized lightning and a drawer full of Ultraman masks. Why the masks? Because a man throwing lightning in public needs a face that isn't his, and the costume shop had a sale. That's it. That's the whole origin story. Ghost Hunt 1. A university teacher named Mei Ling possessed mid-lecture, students filming her crawl across the ceiling. I came through the window in an Ultraman mask, slapped my own teacher, slapped the level 9 soul-eating ghost wearing my own former teacher, electrocuted it out of her, and exited via a 3rd floor jump. The clip got 2 million views. In the front row of that classroom, one student watched the masked man move and frowned with dawning recognition. Because military instincts don't graduate. Crystal Shade. Small world. Getting smaller. Ghost Hunt 2. A city bus, driver possessed, steering for a cliff with 40 passengers screaming into their group chats. Tiga mask this time. Grabbed the wheel, fried the ghost through the driver's seat, walked off at the next stop like a commuter. Between hunts, I picked my moment to introduce myself to the state. Not as Liang Wei, obviously. As someone the state would listen to. The government's in-game presence was a guild fronted by a 5-man team whose ad offered players 2,000 yuan a month, which is how you know it was a government project, and whose captain, player name Azure Lynx, was in reality Major General Wei Hao, the man my past life's history books called humanity's strongest. Right now, he was a level 9 druid arguing with his team about aggro etiquette. I approached him in a graveyard at midnight, because presentation is everything, wearing robes, unnaturally backlit, holding a living snake of lightning in my bare hand. The blue heaven is dead, I intoned. The yellow heaven shall rise. I told him I was Huang Fu. Yes, that Huang Fu, the yellow turban immortal, 18 centuries old, awakened by the world's returning spirit energy. I let the lightning crawl up my arm while I explained that evolution was not a game, that the new world was real, that at level 50 its power would pour into flesh, and that the state should prepare accordingly. Then I stepped backward into invisibility and watched from 3 meters away as a major general stood alone in a graveyard, breathing carefully, and finally said, to no one, I need to file the strangest report of my career. He filed it. Political Commissar Lin read it, doubled the state guild's funding the same week, and demanded proof of the immortal's claims. The department also, and I found this out much later from classified minutes, briefly discussed whether Crystal Shade, the soldier from my Borefield and that university classroom, could be assigned to cultivate a closer rapport with the individual Vengeance, a sentence her commanding officer read aloud exactly once before she stood up, and the proposal died of natural causes with a first-class commendation for its funeral. The state now believed an 1800-year-old immortal was advising it. This would eventually get awkward. Everything I build eventually gets awkward. It's my architectural style. Ghost Hunt 3 was the one that changed the math. The intel said 8 ghosts nesting in a forest outside the city. I walked in confident because 8 was a Tuesday. The forest said 19. 19, including a Tier 1 red ghost, a genuine elite, and its opening move was hypnosis that didn't feel like an attack at all. It felt like remembering. My mother's kitchen, the smell of rice, a voice saying, rest now, you've done enough. And the horrifying part is that the voice was right. I had done enough, and my knees were already bending. I bit through my own lip. Blood, pain, the taste of copper, and the kitchen tore away like wet paper with the red thing's face behind it. After that, it was just an ugly, scrambling, tree-splintering brawl. 19 against 1, lightning against smoke, and I won it the way you win ugly fights, by refusing to lose in any given second until the seconds ran out. Then I soul-searched the Red Ghost remains and found the actual headline buried in its orders. The Skrulls had left their spring eye, broken the Singer civilization's containment rules outright, and 2 Skrull warriors, disguised as humans, had been embedded in a very specific company, Muyun Corporation, my old employer. The universe has a sense of humor like a tax audit, so I went back to the office, officially to resign in person, which felt fantastic, 10 out of 10, would quit again. Unofficially, to walk every floor with my senses open, sniffing for psionic signatures among the cubicles. I shorted the security cameras as I went, took one catastrophically wrong turn involving the women's restroom that we will never speak of again, and found signature number 1 in the information department, a woman, or a Skrull wearing one. I didn't fight her. I did something meaner. I walked up speaking fluent Skrull, the language I'd spent a previous lifetime hearing screamed over burning cities, and introduced myself as an inspector from the home fleet. Her spine snapped straight. She confessed the whole operation to her superior officer, me, standing in a break room. The Ghost campaign, a plan to steal Muyun's algorithms, deployment details. I thanked her for her diligence and ordered her back to base to await commendation. The second one got no theater because the second one was a warrior, and warriors check credentials with their hands. He was lodged in the CEO's office upstairs, wearing the CEO's special assistant like a suit, and he made me the moment I crossed the threshold, which I respected, and threw a desk at me, which I also respected, desk work being his cover. The fight lasted the length of the office, filing cabinets dying like extras, his combat blade against my materialized lightning in a room built for quarterly reviews, and it ended at the window wall with him learning that human mages had apparently returned to this drought planet a few centuries early. I looted a laser pistol off the body for the department's engineers, straightened a surviving portrait out of some instinct, and stepped off the 19th floor balcony because stairs felt bureaucratic and I just quit this company anyway. Best resignation in corporate history. HR is still processing it. Somebody photographed that. Mid-fall, coat flaring, mask on. By morning, I was encrypted with a hashtag, and the state finally did what states do, assigned me a handler. Her name was Ling Tao, military, sharp as a paper cut, and her first field report allegedly opened with the sentence, "The target jumps off buildings for no operational reason." Her first home visit set the tone of our entire working relationship. She arrived with fruit, a government smile, and a shoulder holster her tailoring almost hid, and I greeted her at the door with, "Come in, and you can leave the gun in the umbrella stand." The smile flickered exactly once. She left the gun holstered, sat, and put a folder on my table. A deed, an apartment, city center, a gift from a grateful nation, in a building I'd later learn had immortals on the ground floor. I asked what happened if I turned out to be a threat after they'd housed me so nicely. "Then the relocation is convenient for everyone," she said pleasantly, and I decided we were going to get along, and we did. And above all of it, the real chess move. The Singer civilization noticed the Skrulls' rule-breaking, and their response had the warmth of an accountant fixing a ledger. They deleted the entire Skrull fleet parked at Yunlu and handed Spring Eye number 001 back to humanity. The board reset. The timeline I remembered was officially dead. Everything from here on out was uncharted. Good, I thought. The charted version ended with everybody dying. I'd take my chances with the fog. Level 11 opened the road to Goldflower City, the imperial capital, and I walked in with a wolf. Big White, a pet hatched from the Wolf King's eggs, who had inherited his father's size and none of his father's work ethic, and who treated the imperial highway as a series of napping opportunities connected by snacks. The capital hit like a level curve made of architecture. Walls you could quarter a village on. Boulevards of nobles, knights, and errand runners. Every third NPC over-leveled enough to end my whole career by sneezing. A palace district that glowed on the skyline like a loot notification. And for a returning dead man, a museum of griefs. I'd watched this city burn once, from the losing side, and here it was, unburned, loud, rude, magnificent, with years left on the clock to keep it that way. An NPC named Eldrin, a palace attendant I ran errands for in week 1, capital errands, meaning carry this letter across 4 districts and don't read it, paid out better than any dungeon, a villa deed in a good district, and, more importantly, the palace connection that would shortly change everything. The capital is where the game stopped being a village comedy and became politics with health bars. First stop, the Scholar Sanctuary, the Empire's brain trust, holding the invitation old Fimble had given me a lifetime of levels ago. The scholar at the door, a man named Garrick, looked at my merchant-grade robe and diagnosed me on sight, nouveau riche buying respectability. He said the sanctuary wasn't a shop. The sanctuary, Garrick said, does not sell membership. Gold cannot buy learning. Agreed, I said, so let's bet the gold on the learning. 100 million coins says I pass your senior scholar examination. Today, cold. If I fail, the sanctuary keeps the money as a donation from an ignorant merchant.
You could hear his worldview crack down the middle. 100 million was the sanctuary's operating budget for years. He ran upstairs, committees convened, and an hour later I sat in an examination hall built for humbling princes, with a dozen scholars gathered to enjoy watching the rich man drown. 30 questions. Imperial history, magical theory, monster taxonomy, planar cosmology. The kind of exam that takes candidates a decade of study because the source material is scattered across a continent's restricted archives. Or one previous lifetime of being a poor scholar with library access and nothing else to do. I answered 26 correctly. On question 19, a taxonomy problem about hydra regeneration thresholds, the invigilator stood up to check I wasn't reading off my sleeve. On 24, somebody in the gallery started taking notes off my answer.
When the scores were tallied, the hall had the atmosphere of a funeral where the corpse sits up. A saint of the sanctuary, named Ronan, came down personally to shake my hand. A golden epic advanced scholar badge was produced from a vault, and Garrick delivered his apology with the body language of a man passing a kidney stone. I misjudged you, scholar, he managed. You did, I agreed warmly, because grace is free, but he'd earned full price. Membership mattered. The sanctuary wasn't just prestige, it was the Empire's deepest bench of high-tier casters, and I had plans for that bench. Then the palace called. The village chief's promised audience with Princess Sylvie came through, which still made no administrative sense, and I walked into the throne room to meet the girl who would decide the continent's fate. Princess Sylvie, 15, holding a fracturing empire together with spreadsheets and spite. Northern provinces gone to 2 rebel dukes, court riddled with agents, father unwell in ways nobody would name. In my past life, her side lost slow and bloody, city by city, and the histories wrote her as a tragic footnote. In this one, she had something her past self never did. A scholar with 100 years of spoilers, standing in her throne room, about to commit the audacity of his career. A scholar of divination, she repeated, in the tone royalty reserves for horoscope salesmen. And what have the stars told you, scholar? That in 19 days, I said, you intend to move against the northern faction in your own court. 3 arrests, time to the grain festival, using the palace guard's second rotation because you don't trust the first. The stars think your timing is right and your third target is wrong. The room went so quiet I could hear a guard's gauntlet creak as his hand found his sword. That plan existed in exactly one place, behind the eyes of the girl on the throne. She hadn't written it down. She hadn't told her guard commander. Sylvie raised one hand, and the sword stopped being about to happen. She studied me for a long, recalculating moment, 15 years old and re-deriving her entire security model in real time. And then, she did the thing that made me loyal to her before I'd planned to be. She didn't ask how. She asked, what else do the stars know? By the end of that audience, I held quest agent authority, the right to issue royal quests to the entire player race in her name. One conversation, from tourist to state institution. On the way out, her chamberlain asked for my address for official correspondence, and I gave it. An official correspondence turned out to mean the princess sending me follow-up questions at 2 in the morning like a student before finals. The Empire's future was being decided in a group chat of 2. Getting near the throne also meant passing its shadow. Kalen, the Imperial Court's Tier 7 Archmage, honored elder, national treasure, voice like a library, robes like a sunset, and, in my past life's memory, the single most dangerous snake in the building, the kind that waits decades between bites. A divination scholar, he said warmly, materializing beside me in a palace corridor the way honored elders do. The court must verify such gifts, you understand. A small trial. For form's sake. The trial was a soul realm, his mind hosting mine in a gray arena, and the examiner was a construct called Hunter Zod, all blades and blur, tuned, I suspected, several notches above, for form's sake. Killing me there wouldn't kill me, but it would mark me as a fraud, and frauds don't get palace access. So I fought the way a rich coward fights. No elegance, no pride, just an entire shop's worth of one-use scrolls emptied into the arena, walls of fire, chained roots, decoys, a flash freeze I'd bought that morning, violence by volume until the construct came apart mid-lunge. Kalen applauded softly as the arena dissolved. "Resourceful," he said, smiling with his mouth while his eyes did inventory on me. I bowed and smiled back and did my own inventory. Two liars agreeing to like each other, each filing the other under later. Later came. Oh, later came. And then there was Clara. Her storyline had followed me to the capital, and it was accelerating. First, a reunion with Tima, the mare the village chief had gifted me, an actual tearful girl and horse moment I stood next to awkwardly while the horse gave me a look that said we both knew whose horse she was. Returned, obviously. Then the capital's junior nobility decided to teach the shopkeeper a lesson. A formal duel, Clara against a noble brat named Finian, academy-trained, family blade, gallery packed with his sneering cousins. Before the match, I handed Clara a wrapped bundle and told her it was a lucky charm from home. It was the best sword in the village, the glued one. Finian opened with the academy's textbook overhead feint. Clara parried with the village junk shop's finest. The blades kissed, and the sword's one glorious property fired. 3 full seconds of shock. 3 seconds of a noble air vibrating inside his own armor like a phone on a marble table, eyes enormous, while a grocery girl walked around him, selected her angle with the unhurried care of someone arranging shelves, and put him into the dirt. The gallery of cousins made a sound like a punctured balloon. The betting house, where I'd placed an insultingly large sum on the shopkeeper at insulting odds, paid me $3.34 million. I was starting to notice a pattern that would define my whole portfolio. Investing in Clara outperformed every market on the continent. Then the game showed me exactly how deep that investment went. A drop of Clara's blood, obtained through her quest chain, turned out to have a hidden use. Gilding. Applied to equipment, it could upgrade quality beyond normal limits. The rarest enhancement mechanic in the entire game, locked behind one girl's bloodline. I collected 106 drops through her storyline, asked 0 questions I couldn't answer, and filed away the biggest one. What exactly was flowing in the veins of a grocery clerk from Nolan Village? Her leveling pace was the other clue. We took her training into the Hydra Swamp, where the resident Hydra had spent years eating adventuring parties and had never met a mage who pre-knew which head regenerated first. Then the Mushroom King's Hollow, a boss whose spore clouds had blinded every previous challenger, and whose arena I walked into wearing a wind enchantment purchased specifically because I remembered the patch notes of reality. Clara fought at my side through all of it, and that's when the numbers went wrong in the best way. She leveled when we fought together, not normally, multiplicatively. The system eventually named it to my face, Bloodline Connection. In one campaign stretch, she rocketed from level 10 to level 40, while the leaderboard's finest were celebrating 20, and the forum melted down trying to explain the shopkeeper on the Imperial Honors lists. The dominant theory, designer-made protagonist NPC, the story's chosen one, and we were all extras in Clara Vance's game. They were closer than they knew, and still not close. Nobody's imagination went far enough, mine hadn't either, and I'd read the ending. Meanwhile, my human empire needed funding, so I invented an industry, first-person videos. The game could export a player's view, so I sold mine, 0.6 yuan a pop, ordinary quests, boss kills, palace gossip. 70% of every sale went as tribute to the Singer Civilization's game inspector, which everyone thought was extortion, and I knew was a bribe with a purpose. The inspector controlled interstellar teleportation. I was buying a ticket to Skrull Star, one download at a time. Long game. The longest. The guild leader chat room formed around then too, a private channel of the server's heavyweights, where I dispensed prophecy in the tone of a man guessing luckily. It's also where Ever Sober cashed in his statue favor properly. I pointed him at a wandering brewmaster NPC named Chen Stormstout and told him the hidden Pandaren questline opened for anyone who could outgift the panda's thirst. Ever Sober bought 10 jars of the Empire's best wine, hauled them across 2 provinces on foot, and came back weeks later as the server's first and only martial artist, bowing to me over the chat with a formality that made Red Eyes post crying emojis for an hour. Investments in people, best returns in either world. The Giant Wood Canyon campaign paid better anyway. As quest agent, I took a 1% cut of every player reward I brokered, and one canyon defense netted me 30,000 experience in commissions alone. And the battle itself? Oh, the battle deserves its own act. The Empire needed the canyon held against a rebel thrust. I needed the Empire generous. So on day 2, with our lines actually holding fine, I sent Imperial Command a dispatch written in the trembling hand of a man watching his position collapse. Casualties mounting, Eastern Palisade lost, morale failing, reinforcements and emergency funds urgently required. The Crown, bless its treasury, responded like a worried parent, emergency rewards for all defenders, doubled bounties, and a decoration called the Equality Badge for the heroic scholar coordinating the doomed defense. The doomed defense, at that moment, was holding a barbecue night behind the intact palisade. War reporting is an art form, and I am a master of the impressionist school. Then the enemy made it real. Their field commander, a level 70 warlord priest named Zechariah Dale, got tired of his infantry dying to a canyon full of respawning lunatics and waded in personally, robes glowing, mace the size of a door. Level 70 against a defense whose tallest player was 20-something. On paper, a massacre. On paper. I gathered the player captains and did the math out loud. My favorite math. The math the NPCs of this world never quite believe until they see it. Players respawn. He doesn't. Every player death, 30 minutes in the queue, 0 permanent loss. Every scratch on him, forever. So we fed him waves. Squad after squad hit him, died, re-queued, and hit him again. A conveyor belt of disposable violence. Everyone with a bleed effect, a poison, a chip of true damage, anything that stuck. He killed hundreds of us an hour, and it meant nothing. And the meaning nothing is what broke him before the damage did. Somewhere around hour 4, a level 70 veteran of 30 campaigns stood knee-deep in his 800th kill and understood, visibly, from a distance, that he was in a fight with arithmetic. Arithmetic won. It always does. He dropped an epic blade that went to auction and bought half a district. The after-action rating came back S, and I leveled twice out of the reward mail while the forum coined a term for the tactic that I'm told is now in actual military journals. The Ghost Rush. Rankings reshuffled. Jiantian, already bleeding members since the Forum Wars, quietly died as a top guild, its recruiters ignored, its name a punchline, and Skybreaker Blade rebuilt his career in a smaller, quieter shape, still charming, still talented, still on my friends list, where I checked his location the way you check a smoke detector. In my past life, his treason took him a decade and a position of trust to arrange. In this one, he'd never climb high enough to sell anything that mattered, and he'd never know his ceiling had a name. That's the revenge nobody writes ballads about. Not killing the traitor, just quietly repossessing his future. And in the capital, the princess started sending me quests at night, unofficial ones, the kind that don't appear in logs. That's when the vampire nearly ended my whole career. His name was Xylar, a vampire elder working for the Northern Dukes, and he ambushed me on a night courier run with the polite confidence of a predator who has never once needed a plan B. He introduced himself. Vampires do that. Centuries of theater in the blood. Little scholar, he said, unfolding out of the dark like a bad idea. The Dukes send their regards. He was right to be confident. He outleveled me by an era. I burned both blinks in the first exchange, burned the staff's third a breath later, burned every scroll in my bag with a verb on it. Fire, ice, smoke. A decoy that fooled him for exactly the amount of time it takes to sneer. His claws kept arriving half a second ahead of my future. My health dipped past the line where mages start making peace with respawn timers. So I used the one spell no NPC in this world can counter, the racial ultimate of my entire species. I logged off. Vanished out of his grip mid-lunge, sat in my apartment listening to my own heartbeat, ate a sandwich, and logged back in behind a different hill. Xylar spent the rest of his short unlife telling people a mortal had been raptured out of his hands, and nobody believed him, and then Dawnshard found him. Who's Dawnshard? At this point in the story, all you need to know. Something vast and starlit that patrolled the princess's storyline, shaped like a deer when she felt like it, and she one-shotted a vampire elder the way you flick a crumb off a table. I hitched exactly one ride on her back during that questline, and spent it very politely not asking questions. The deer had opinions about being ridden. The deer would matter enormously later. File cabinet. The princess's night quests escalated to burglary. Target, the city manor of Duke Valerius Stone, one of the 2 rebel dukes, currently away at the front pretending to be loyal by mail. I went in past midnight, invisible, over the garden wall, and the manor's first line of defense found me anyway. A jade golem gatekeeper, 3 tons of enchanted stone with orders and no imagination. My lightning had just been upgraded to legendary with a charge mechanic. Hold the cast, feed it mana, release something rude. I held it until my hair stood up, released, and the number that came off the golem read 13,266. The golem sat down, permanently. I stood over the rubble, whispering the damage number to myself like a prayer. The vaults were the real dungeon. Behind a chessboard puzzle whose solution I remembered from a strategy guide written by someone who died for it, the Duke kept his life in 3 layers. Layer 1, money, boring, took it anyway. Layer 2, a Wonder-class blueprint, the Terracotta Legion, an army of statues awaiting a founder. Layer 3, the personal chest, held the 2 real prizes. A scroll containing 1 cast of a 6th tier spell, 48 hours of shelf life, a nuke with an expiry date, and a letter, a love letter, from Duke Stone, to an enemy empire's crown prince named Joran. I stood in a treason vault at 2 in the morning reading a rebel duke's tender correspondence with the enemy heir, and let me tell you, the man's military dispatches never showed this much vocabulary. Blackmail so pure it belonged in a museum, behind velvet ropes. That's when the vault door filled with a tier 4 enforcer named Flint, sword already moving, and negotiation was not on his skill bar. I threw the shelf between us, grabbed everything loose, and as his blade came through the shelving, I shouted, and eyewitness accounts, meaning Flint, confirm this. Inherit you, father, don't ask. Adrenaline writes its own dialogue. The random teleport scroll fired, space folded, and Flint was left holding a sword, a ruined vault, and a sentence he'd be repeating to interrogators for weeks. The princess received the love letter like a woman receiving oxygen. Then she prepaid me for quest rings 20 through 25 in advance with a fresh 6-tier scroll. 773 days on this one's clock. A pocket apocalypse with a best before date, and a princess who paid me an ordinance because she'd noticed money didn't move me anymore. 2 weeks of stalling later, the war arrived to collect. The scenario was called Desperate Escape, and it did what it said. The princess had to be moved down the river, past everything the dukes could throw, with tens of thousands of players signed on as escort and the whole server watching the stakes. Water ghosts hit the convoy first, boiling up under the barges at midnight, slick gray hands on the gunnels, players falling into black water in full armor. I stood off the lead barge's bow, lobbing fire into the river, and one fireball crit the ghost matriarch for 8,160, a number so far above the server's current pay grade that the deck went briefly silent, and then a nearby player found religion and shouted "Elder Fan," and a nickname attached itself to me permanently, like gum on a shoe. From Keksing, within an hour, the whole flotilla was using it. Within a week, NPCs were. I've been called worse by better, and there are days I'd pay the old vampire to come back and just call me Little Scholar again. Then the riverbank filled with the actual Bill, Duke Rantilus in person. First time I'd seen him outside a wanted poster, smaller than his crimes. Turalian, a paladin who punched sideways through siege towers. Antonidas, an archmage whose teleportation could move armies, demonstrating this by moving one onto our shore in a single white flash. 10,000 enemy faction players stepping out of folded space with the Duke's coin in their pockets. Because it turns out treason scales too. 10,000 against our convoy. Their forward ranks were already posting victory screenshots. The princess's scroll had been riding in my chest pocket for 2 weeks, and I'd made peace with the fact that there would never be a smart time to spend a 6-tier spell. There would only be a correct time. I broke the seal, and the scroll took everything I had to aim it, and the sky went the kind of white that doesn't have a name because nobody who names things is usually that close. The river stood up. Vertically. The bank where 10,000 mercenaries had been arranging themselves into formations became a single geometry of light. And when sound came back, roughly 6,000 of them were in the respawn queue, deleted between 2 heartbeats, an entire mercenary economy annihilated in one frame. The forum's kill feed archive of that second is still the most screenshotted image in the game's history. It's just white. That's the screenshot. White. The survivor's command structure lasted 3 minutes longer because in the blast shadow I'd already reached Duke Rantilus with a stolen mind control relic, and the Duke began issuing orders. My orders. His vanguard wheeled into his own second line. His mages shielded empty water. Turalian screamed at his liege across the chaos and got told, in the Duke's own voice, to hold position and stop questioning the plan. Walnut, their walking siege engine, was the only one who did the truly dangerous thing. He read the battlefield right. He saw the starlit deer coming down the river valley at dawn shard speeds and spent 99% of his lifetime power, decades of cultivation, gone in a breath, on a rebirth seal to survive her opening pass. It worked. Barely. He lived to retire into whatever bandits do instead of pensions, and the deer still nearly killed him through it. And when an aftershock threw the princess off the barge, something with my name on it dove off a cliff in dragon shape and caught her out of the air, and we will simply not be unpacking the transformation item I used because the after-action report was busy printing SSS and +10 world prestige, and legends don't annotate. Phase 1 of the princess's line, complete. My level, 21 to 26 in one campaign. The replacement 6th tier scroll, already in my bag, because Sylvie paid debts like she fought, immediately and in full. My video of the battle sold at 6.48 yuan, premium pricing, 2 million downloads. Among the buyers, several national militaries who experienced a 6th tier spell in first person and started asking new budget questions. World prestige turned out to be the key to the next door, territory. 10 prestige let a player buy land and found a settlement, and I was the first human eligible, which meant the land office had no procedures, no precedent, and one official named Grainer, who understood instantly that precedent is negotiable. 200,000 coins of administrative gratitude later, I owned the river plot I'd wanted from the start. Moonlight River, deep water, defensible bend, trade lines in 3 directions. The parcel every future guild in my past life went to war over, purchased here for the price of one bureaucrat's renovated villa. I named the city Apuxi, which is a pun in my hometown dialect that I refuse to explain, and which the forum immediately mistranslated 3 different ways, one of them obscene, and the obscene one is now what half the server calls my capital with great affection. Home sweet home. The founding weeks earned their own legends. The tavern gotcha, the recruiting mechanic where you buy drinks and hope talent walks in, ran on luck, so I made Azure Wyvern pull. Our resident luck cryptid drew 5 green quality staff in a row, including a butler named Silas with 3 administration traits, odds statistically equivalent to being struck by lightning indoors, twice, on a Tuesday. She celebrated by asking if she could keep one of them as a pet, was told butlers are not pets, and appealed the ruling for a week. The first refugee caravan arrived half-starved off the war roads, braced for gate taxes, and got hot meat soup and housing assignments instead, because I'd learned lordship from the toll booth clowns by inversion, and because a lord's reputation compounds faster than any bank. Word traveled. The second caravan was bigger. The 5th had people who'd walked past 2 other cities to reach mine. And a carpenter named Brooke looked over my construction plans, the fortress, the tower district, the wall footing sized for things I hadn't told anyone about yet, said nothing, and quietly ordered more nails. Hire people like Brooke. Whatever you're building, hire people like Brooke. And then the tavern door opened, and Destiny walked in wearing a bathrobe. Mad Silas. A wandering researcher NPC, technically. A man who spoke in botanical prophecy and non-sequiturs, actually. I recognized him from my past life, where guilds fought wars over his recruitment years from now because his research produced offensive plants that could hold city walls by themselves. I signed him to a 30-year magic contract on the spot, sight unseen, salary absurd, and he sealed the deal by gifting me a golden walnut. Walnut, he corrected me. It sat in my inventory doing nothing. Remember the walnut. I'm serious. Of everything in this story, remember the walnut. The guild, meanwhile, took one look at my staffing decisions and decided Dave was my most beloved. The shipping posts wrote themselves. The Lord and his gardener. I banned 3 players a week and it changed nothing. The unicorn trial came next, an advanced secret realm that had no business existing at our level bracket, and inside it, the game stopped joking entirely. The realm's flavor was void, geometry that disagreed with itself, whispers in a language my interface refused to subtitle, and a boss with the movement kit of a nightmare named Cassidon, who didn't approach so much as delete the distance. Every blink I had, he had a rude answer to. He put me on the floor twice. The second time, his blade was coming down and my cooldowns were all showing numbers. The only thing between my soul and deletion was a consumable blade called Sorrow of the Fungus, which Dave had pressed into my hands the week before with the words, "The mushrooms remember." It fired once. It did something I still can't parse to the void around Cassidon. It bought me the 4 seconds that turned a death into a win. I sent Dave a raise and a formal apology to all mushrooms. The realm paid out an ice barrier skill, a survival trump card I'd lean on for the rest of my career, and a fortress blueprint, and I stood in the loot glow making plans for the ugliest, most over-engineered river fortress this continent had ever seen. My guild started calling the design the Shanghai Fortress. The name stuck because it was accurate. The Void Whispers also stuck, filed under Expansion 8 Problems, a drawer that was getting heavy. The Custom Storyline Authority got its first real workout around then, and I used it to clean a city. The Spectre infestation in Oran's sewers, a problem the City Lord's administration had been budgeting for 6 years, met 900 players with glowing weapons and a bounty table I'd written myself. The sewers were spotless in a weekend. And the investigation, the cleanup, accidentally surfaced, sealed correspondence in a smuggler's cache, put a rope around the neck of Arthur, the City Lord's own uncle, who had been selling garrison schedules north. The execution was public. The City Lord attended, thanked the Crown for its vigilance, and looked at me across the scaffold with the expression of a man updating a list. Noted, Damon. Same to you. Clara hit 53 on her connection-boosted rocket ride and then Tier 5 through 3 back-to-back secret realms that would have bankrupted a noble house. Then the Empire noticed, and the nobility did what nobility does when a commoner outgrows the furniture. A duel. Formal, public, unrefusable. Clara versus a noble champion named Alara, who walked in marinated in a Tier 6 combat potion, with a referee whose pockets audibly clinked when he moved. Cheating. Refereed by cheating. Watched by a stadium of people invested in the shopgirl learning her place. Clara fought anyway, because telling her not to fight is how you get fought. And she was winning through the potion. That's the part the nobles never budgeted for. Ilara came in swollen with a Tier 6 elixir, moving faster than her own training, and Clara read the artificial speed inside 3 exchanges, adjusted her footwork like she was correcting a ledger entry, and started taking the duel apart on fundamentals. The stands went from smug to quiet to genuinely upset. Money had been spent. The shopgirl wasn't cooperating. So the referee raised his flag to call a phantom foul, and his mouth was open, and the word was coming. So I fireballed the referee. Mid-gesture, off the platform, robes smoking, flag still in hand, describing a dignified arc into the 3rd row. The arena went silent the way only 10,000 aristocrats can go silent, a silence with lorgnettes, and I stood up in my scholar's badge and asked, into it, whether any other officials were feeling impartial today. No further officials felt impartial. Duchess Eleanor, half covering for her own tangled reasons, rose and declared the fireball an act of the heavens clearly, for who would dare? The record still says that, act of the heavens. The duel resumed refereeless, and Clara finished it clean, potion and all, and made the winning sequence look gentle, which was the cruelest thing anyone did in that arena all day. And I, as the betting house's newest heavy investor, collected 15 million on her victory because I had also, weeks earlier, employed the goblin banker Aura Brightcoin, who ran the book. Fight the nobles, find the nobles, only casino the nobles bet in, vertical integration. Clara's thank you gift was small and round and changed my life. A hearthstone, gold quality. Set a home point, and from 1,000 kilometers away, channel 2.5 seconds and be home. A commoner girl handed me the single greatest escape item in the game like it was a birthday card. I hung it around my neck and it never came off again. Foreshadowing? Foreshadowing. Meanwhile, ever sober, the server's only martial artist, came to collect a favor for my treasure pile and got offered the Sunflower Manual, a legendary technique with one small prerequisite surgery that made him leave a dent in my doorframe. He took the Jade Dragon statue instead, a wonder that boosted cultivation speed, and mailed it home to his family like a filial son mailing back souvenirs. Both of those objects come back later. Everything comes back later. That's what this game was, a conspiracy of Chekhov's warehouse. Then Clara didn't wake up. Her breakthrough obsession had pulled her under, into a coma, into a mind maze the game generated from her own history, and the only rescue protocol was me going in after her. Her head, from the inside, was a museum curated by anxiety. Room 1, a ghost cat stalking me across a floor of minesweeper tiles, every wrong tile a detonation, the cat knowing the safe path and using it, tail up, insufferable. Room 2, a rock emperor dueling a golem the size of a cathedral over stakes the dream never explained, and both of them pausing, mid-swing, to watch me cross the floor, the way things in dreams watch. Room 3, the boss. An armored knot of everything she was afraid of becoming, which the maze's own crystals nerfed by 99% once I'd gathered them, because even her nightmares had been built by a girl who did her homework and left herself notes. And then the maze stopped being a dungeon and became a documentary. I lived her childhood, walked through it, unable to touch anything. The shop, the sick father, the years of counting coins by candlelight and refusing every easier road. No jokes here. I came out of that maze knowing exactly who I'd been investing in, and understanding that the investment had never been about returns. And at the exit, something was waiting for both of us. Evan, the bird of paradise, a tier 8 god, one of the handful of true divinities this world still had, feathered in sunrise, ancient beyond math. He looked at the unconscious shopgirl and called her descendant of Larea Flo. I didn't know the name then, write it down anyway. Larea Flo, the biggest name in this entire story, hiding inside a coma dungeon's epilogue. Evan adopted Clara as his charge on the spot, ordered her future like a grandfather with a clipboard. She would train, she would rise, she would command, and then turned one burning eye on me and said that when I reached tier 6, he would take me as an apprentice too. A god, penciling me into his calendar. I bowed and did not say, it's a date, because I have some survival instinct. Clara woke up, breakthrough complete, and the Empire made it official. 15th Legion commander of the Imperial Army, youngest in history. The grocery girl from Nolan Village now outranked the nobles who tried to referee her into the dirt, and every one of them had to salute. I celebrated by shopping. Pearl City, the Empire's merchant capital, where a dwarf engineer named Mozanic refused to sell me anything until I'd proven myself a serious person through a 20-ring quest gauntlet of fetch jobs, forge errands, and one memorable afternoon holding a calibration crystal perfectly still while he shouted measurements at an apprentice. The payout was worth every indignity, the Hall of Prayer blueprint, a wonder that multiplied sacrifice-based bonuses. Don't worry, this becomes obscene shortly. I also bought back my own stolen then fenced terracotta blueprint for $5 million from a broker who opened at 9 and wept about his children at 7. 3 hours of haggling. He had no children. I checked, mid-negotiation. His counteroffer to the accusation was 6.5, delivered without shame and, honestly, respect. Then the game handed me the most dangerous toy yet, the custom storyline function. Quest agents of my standing could now author quest rings, subject to objectives, for the crown. I wrote rings 17 through 25 of the Imperial storyline myself. Let me say that again. The game let me write the plot I was being rewarded for completing. 3 objectives, my choice of methods, the Empire's budget. The first thing I authored was a war college. I shipped Clara off to study under General Thorne for a week, then entered her in the Officer Association's wargame circuit, the sandbox tables where the Empire's command class settled reputations. I attended her first sitting personally, ostensibly as her sponsor, actually to watch. Her opponent, the association president himself, 40 years of doctrine, undefeated at the annual table. Clara spent the early game trading small losses with the placid face of a shopkeeper making change, and I watched the president visibly relax, and then, move by move, the map closed around him like a drawstring bag. He resigned staring at his own supply lines, and I applauded exactly as loudly as decorum allowed plus 10%. Then she took Duchess Eleanor apart 2 games to nothing, and Eleanor, to her genuine credit, shook her hand and started taking notes. The nobility's last theory about her, lucky sword arm, no head for command, died on a map table with witnesses. Her bandit suppression operation got approved with actual applause, and her aide Briar, assigned as a noble watchdog, transitioned to open fangirls so fast the transition itself should have been studied. By week's end, Briar was quoting her. The operation itself, the Red Ridge Raid, I choreographed like a heist. Weeks out, my player intelligence team drifted into the bandit fortress as down-on-their-luck recruits, worked the kitchens, mapped the walls, and complained about wages so authentically 2 of them got promoted. At 5 in the morning on the chosen day, they opened the gates from inside, and Clara's knights came through the gap in a silence you could pour. The bandit's Tier 5 enforcer, another one of those flint-type monsters, died before his boots were on, 4 blades through his bedroll on a count of 3. The fortress woke up already conquered. 0 knight casualties. 0. The after-action rating printed SS. The Empire started teaching the raid as a textbook case, and somewhere in the general staff, a memo finally asked the correct question. Where exactly did the shopgirl's foreign scholar learn to run infiltration networks? Nowhere, gentlemen. I learned it from your future. Evan watched all of it, nodded once, and left for his own realm, and his parting gift nearly stopped my heart. A summoning scroll. Clara's summoning scroll. One use. Summon Tier 5 Clara Vance to my side. Anywhere. Read that clause again, like I did, 5 times. Anywhere. The scroll didn't say, in the game. I put it in the deepest slot of my inventory and heard, very faintly, the sound of 2 worlds' walls becoming negotiable. Level 29 arrived, and the version cap slammed down. Experience kept flowing and had nowhere to go, so the system issued me an Experience Crystal Stone, a battery for banked levels. Mine started accumulating immediately, millions deep. Remember the battery too. The walnut, the name Larea Flow, and the battery. This story is a warehouse. Offline, the bill for all my masked adventures finally arrived, hand-delivered. The relevant department, the state's Alien Affairs Agency, requested a meeting, and by requested I mean they already knew everything. Political Commissar Lin laid the folder on the table like a poker hand and dealt it out one photo at a time. Vengeance, my character screen. The ghost hunter in the costume masks, 6 blurry heroics. The individual who exited Muyun Tower via the 19th floor. Me, mid-air, coat flaring, genuinely a great photo. And Huang Fu, the 1800-year-old immortal currently advising this department. A graveyard surveillance still. A silence. In my defense, I said, the immortal gave you excellent advice. Wei Hao, sitting to the commissar's left, made a sound I can only describe as a major general's soul leaving through his nose. He'd filed the strangest report of his career about a 23-year-old with a costume budget. Fine, cards up. I gave them the real briefing. All of it. The game was an armory. Gold-quality items could materialize. Level 50 was the floodgate. The Skrulls were landlords from hell, and I'd already lived through the next century once and didn't recommend it. To prove the materialization claim, I produced the village chief's gold staff from thin air and lit the conference room like a rave. Then the far door opened, and the department introduced their own classified assets, and I learned my government had been keeping immortals in the basement. Old monsters, cultivators from before the spirit energy dried up, who had survived 10,000 years of drought by sleeping through most of it, now awake, cranky, and attending security briefings in period costume. The first, square-faced, imperial bearing, a presence like a mountain doing you a favor, turned out to be the founder of the Ming dynasty. Waved off every honorific by the second sentence. Call me Lao Chang. The second arrived late, radiating the specific menace of upper management, poured himself vodka into a laboratory measuring glass, 100 milliliters exactly, because cups lie, and sat down without introducing himself. His forum ID did it for him. I swear this on my 10 billion. The man had registered a game account, and the ID was a Three Kingdoms pun, because the man was Dong Zhuo, the Dong Zhuo, Chancellor of the Han, poet, warlord, burner of Wuchao, currently tier 4 and openly annoyed about it. You, he said by way of greeting, are the one who drained the Yunlu spring before I woke up. Finders Keepers is an ancient principle, Chancellor. He drank his exact 100 milliliters. I'd have done the same, faster. I negotiated with my own government while 2 dead emperors watched like in-laws. The deal, the state got my intel, my techniques, my full cooperation. I got a spring eye of my own, half its output mine to keep, and immunity from all future proposals involving the word dissection. Handshakes around the table. Lao Chang called me young friend Su. Dong Zhuo asked whether the game had a poetry skill, and when told no, muttered that the developers were barbarians. History is so much dumber up close, and so much better. And then, because the mood in the room was, why not, I gave them one prediction free of charge. The natives were going to revive. The game's NPCs, the whole new world, was not fiction and would not stay behind glass. Nobody in the room fully believed me. I wrote the date on a napkin anyway. The first joint operation came fast. Lingwu Mountain, where the Skrulls had planted their remaining ground base around a captured spring eye, guarded, shielded, and pumping our planet's blood into storage tanks for shipment home. I went in alone, invisible, with a plan built entirely out of spite. The base was a bowl of floodlights and patrol patterns around the captured spring, and I ghosted through it for a night, learning its rhythms, before making my first hire. A Skrull officer named Vexara, caught alone in a corridor, one purple-black orb of mind control later, became my hands and my briefing. From her, I learned 2 beautiful facts. 1. The base's arsenal included Tyne 3 missiles. Their strategic nukes stored 2 bunkers from the airfield. 2. A psionic transport ship was scheduled in 3 days to fly the harvested spirit energy home to Skrullstar, where it would be received with ceremony at their crown jewel orbital hub, the floating island, in front of dignitaries. A shipment. Expected. Welcomed. Uninspected, because who inspects their own harvest? There was also an incident during this period involving Vexara, Skrull courtship customs, and a slap across my disguised face that I only later learned was a compliment, and which I logged, at the time, as a workplace injury. Alien HR is a minefield. Moving on. I didn't blow up the ship. Amateurs blow up the ship. The ship was the delivery service, and the delivery service was the whole plan. Over 2 nights, my controlled logistics crew swapped the cargo. Out went the storage tanks, quietly buried. In went the base's own Time 3 arsenal, armed, timers slaved to the docking sequence, manifests forged down to the custom stamps. Then my controlled pilots flew the whole package home, on schedule, waved off by the base commander personally. 3 days later, on a planet I had never visited, the floating island's receiving bay opened its doors for the harvest ceremony, and the welcome ceremony welcomed 40 megatons. An island fell out of their sky, on another planet, because of a forklift manifest. I found out the details much later, and we'll get there, but the base commander at Lingwu found out in real time via priority channel, and I watched an alien invader read the news and age. Then I turned him into a sheep, a spell I'd been saving for someone special, and introduced the sheep to a pyroblast. The garrison surrendered en masse. Dong Zhuo and Lao Cheng strolled through the mop-up like retirees at a park, occasionally slapping a laser out of the air. Humanity took back its second spring eye, and up in orbit, the Singer civilization's war inspector arrived to formally close the rift the Skrulls had been cheating through. The inspector, a being from the Holy Silver Federation, looked exactly like a Draenei from that old game, which nobody around me was old enough to find funny. He reviewed my role in the operation, and instead of a medal, he handed me 2 impossibilities. First, an invitation. Study, someday, at the Holy Silver Secret Court, the Federation's Apex Academy. Second, a Watcher's Beacon fixed to my soul, a one-time divine rescue flare, in case something on this backwater ever tried to kill what he'd just invited. Somewhere far away, 5 Skrull national leaders convened an emergency session about the smoking crater where their floating island used to be. I know because their intelligence services eventually wrote reports about me with my name misspelled. We'll get to that too. Back home, my level ticked to 31, past the version cap, and when players asked how, I said the aliens I'd killed offline must have counted as monsters. This was accepted because at some point my community had collectively decided that questioning Elder Fan was a waste of good farming time. The city needed a crown, so I built one. The Hall of Prayer went up in Apuxi's center, Mozanic's blueprint realized in white stone, and merged with the Jade Dragon statue mechanic into a single sacrifice system. Burn coins at the altar, receive cultivation speed blessing, city-wide, scaling with the offering. The dedication ceremony drew a crowd because my citizens had learned that my ceremonies pay out. The altar's brazier lit, the system asked for my offering. I fed it 19 million coins in one continuous stream, a golden river roaring up into the hall's vault. I held the pour steady while the cheering died into the specific silence of people watching a man burn a province's annual revenue on purpose. Some of them filmed. One guy audibly whispered, "He's actually insane," with deep reverence. And I stood there thinking, correctly, that I was buying the cheapest power in the game. The system, which had clearly been balanced around villages tossing in lunch money, hiccuped, recalculated, and awarded a 1,000% bonus. 12 times cultivation speed, citywide. The announcement banner hadn't finished rendering before the server lost its entire mind. 19 million became a unit of measurement on the forum, as in, how rich are you, in 19 millionths of Elder Fan. Players migrated to Apuxi in caravans that jammed the roads for days. My tax revenue started resembling a national budget's rounding error, then stopped resembling a rounding error, then started making the national budget nervous. Dave, in his greenhouse, celebrated by breeding the twin sunflower, doubling energy generation for plant defenses, an achievement that sounds small and was actually humanity-scale news because every future city wall on this planet would eat from that flower. He told me the good news in a sentence that also included the phrase, Taco Tuesday for the roots. I gave him a raise he didn't notice. Azure Wyvern, our archer gremlin, age 14, celebrated the city's rise by informing the guild that when she grew up, she was moving into the Lord's castle as its official best archer and made me pinky promise on the best archer part. The guild chat screenshotted the pinky promise and captioned it, Lord adopts feral archer. Closest to the truth they ever got. Siege number 2 came and went, barely worth the logline. Wolves versus wall plants. The plants won on a shutout. And in the City Lord's mansion of Oran, the region's actual governor, City Lord Damon, read the reports about my little upstart river town outgrowing his tax base and hired 500 elite volunteers to help defend Apuxi's next siege. Volunteers with instructions in their pockets. Sabotage was coming with a smile on its face. Good. I'd been getting bored of enemies who announced themselves. The sieges came in waves, 3 through 11, and the game escalated them like a bored dungeon master. Monsters first, then bandit confederations, then actual NPC armies with banners and supply trains, because apparently my city had graduated from pest problem to geopolitical concern. We graduated too. My steward Vance and the little mage Kira got upgraded through city defender accessories, and Kira, 12 years old, all elbows and homework, turned out to have portal talent, which meant my logistics officer could now open holes in space. The gate defense rotated wall plants, player militia, and one twin sunflower economy that Dave kept feeding like a proud father. Damon's 500 smiling saboteurs were identified by day 2, isolated by day 3, and spent the actual siege guarding a granary that contained gravel. Politely. With snacks. Count Dorian of Falling Moon Town tried the direct approach, marching on us over rights to the Deepwater port, and discovered that his soldiers had a price and I had a spreadsheet. 80,000 coins a head, relocation package, housing in Apuxi included. Half his army resigned mid-campaign. There's a certain kind of noble that never recovers from learning that loyalty has a market rate, and he'd been underpaying. The Scholar Sanctuary, watching all this with the interest scholars reserve for well-funded chaos, relocated their regional headquarters into Epoxy for 100 million over 10 years. St. Ronan signed the lease. Duchess Serafina co-signed. My river town now had more resident high-tier casters than most duchies. Damon played his last card personally, a summoning scroll, sourced from a very dangerous friend, unleashed at our walls. And Clara, commanding the defense, ran the greatest bluff of the young century. She raised her hand, showed the attacking construct a ring, a guardian deity's ring, and informed it that its master really didn't want to meet hers. The construct did the math. The construct left. Damon fled the region with the specific speed of a man whose bluff got out-bluffed, and I made a note about who exactly sells summoning scrolls to city lords. The note said one word: Kalen. And then the system made it all official. Epoxy, first player city on the continent. In my past life, this milestone took the server 9 months. We did it in 21 days, and the announcement banner hung in the sky for a full hour while my citizens screenshotted themselves under it like tourists. Offline, the Age of Secrets ended. Azure Lynx, my state guild counterpart, whose real name was Major General Wei Hao, tipped me off that a certain Professor Lei had formally proposed solving the Liande Wei question by dissection, for science. The proposal went to committee. The professor went to jail. I sent Wei Hao a fruit basket. Then the government stopped whispering entirely. One evening, every screen in the country, phones, billboards, the works, cut without warning to political commissar Lin in full uniform. And he said the sentences governments spend decades not saying. The aliens exist. They are called the Skrulls. The invasion clock is real and running. The game on your nightstand is the arsenal, and playing it well is now a civic duty. Wartime economy begins at midnight. The world did its week of panic, hoarding, and philosophy, and came out the other side weirdly steadier, because dread with a shape beats dread without one, and this dread came with a quest log. And in the middle of that broadcast, between the terror and the mobilization schedule, they credited the recovery of both Spring Eyes to a player the whole world already knew by his forum name, and my mother's neighbors started asking her careful questions. I watched myself become a national institution from my couch, in my underwear, eating instant noodles. Nobody tells you that's how it happens. There should be a pamphlet. But the Empire's real monster had been moving this whole time, and now he stopped hiding. Kalen, the court's beloved Tier 7 Archmage, the national treasure. The man who'd smiled at me over a soul trial and measured my neck for later. I watched him take the capital in a single evening, through my player's eyes and my own spy runs, and the horror of it was the paperwork. Mind control on the Emperor, mind control on Sylvie. No fires, no fighting. The palace guard saluting the same figures they'd always saluted. The morning proclamations issued under the correct seals in the correct hands, announcing the honored elder Kalen as regent at the royal family's earnest request. The royal family, earnestly requesting, with his fingers in their skulls. Court sessions continued. Sylvie sat her throne and said his words in her voice. By the time the provinces understood anything was wrong, the palace was a puppet theater with a full performance schedule, and the puppeteer had started construction on his real project. The Frenzy Ritual. Here's what the honored elder needed for his breakthrough to Tier 8. Shards of concentrated life force. Here's the exchange rate. 100 commoners rendered down per shard. Here's the quantity on his shopping list. 3,000 shards. 300,000 people, boiled into batteries. So one old man could touch godhood. You want to know the worst part? I knew this was coming. In my past life, the ritual succeeded, and the thing Kalen became afterward broke the continent's spine for a decade, which is why, in this life, I'd been running a parallel operation for weeks that looked, from the outside, like collaboration. Kalen needed ritual participants, warm bodies to power the array's outer rings, roles that didn't kill the participants, and players don't die. So I requested an audience with the usurper, and the two of us had the most polite negotiation of my life, both smiling, both lying, tea going cold between us. The adventurers respect you, scholar, he said. 1 million of them, manning my array. Name your price. The heart of the blue dragon Scotty, I said. A Tier 6 catalyst, worth a duchy, sitting in his confiscated vaults. He studied me for a long moment, deciding whether I was greedy or dangerous, and chose greedy, because greedy was the version of me he could use. Done. You've picked the winning side early, scholar. That's wisdom. I've always been good at knowing how things end, I agreed, and we both smiled, and one of us was right. He thought he was renting cattle. I was placing 1 million respawning agents inside his security perimeter, each earning skillbook rewards from the ritual system while memorizing guard rotations, array node positions, and the floor plan of his doom. 1.4 million players ultimately took part, and the ritual's outer ring duty became, I'm not proud of this, I'm a little proud of this, a tourist event. Players stood in glowing circles powering a usurper's array, farmed their skillbook rewards, took screenshots with the ominous architecture, and reviewed the experience on the forum. 4 stars. Great rewards. Evil vibes. My commission came to 14,000 Tier 1 skill books, of which I donated 13,000 to the State Guild, keeping the optics immaculate and the state grateful. And the remaining 1,000 went to my guild's newest members, because a warlord who doesn't tip is just a bandit with paperwork. And when the ritual reached its irreversible hour, everything I'd aimed at it arrived at once, in order, like a bill with line items. Line 1. The rebel dukes, tipped off through channels they thought were their own spies, attacked the capital to stop a rival's ascension, because the only thing two traitors hate more than the crown is a third traitor doing better. Turalian's paladins hit the outer districts and the city's garrisons split their attention exactly in half. Line 2. The ritual wobbled. Arrays that eat people are precision instruments, and precision instruments hate sieges. Line 3 was the one nobody aimed, and I include myself, and it was the one that hit me hardest to watch. A court mage named Celeste had spent the war as Kaelin's quiet, competent shadow, and Kaelin had never once wondered where her family was. I had. My files on his inner circle flagged her weeks earlier, and I'd chosen not to approach, because some fuses you don't touch. Her family was in the earlier shard batches, all of them. She'd counted and confirmed and kept working beside him with a face like still water, waiting for the 1 hour when his channels would be open. At the Ascension's peak, she walked to the array's keystone, looked up at the honored elder rising in his pillar of stolen lives, said nothing that anyone recorded, and detonated her own core. Self-destruction, at the exact frequency of an ascending soul. The ritual didn't just fail, it reversed and poured. Kaelin took the backblast through channels opened for godhood, and 300,000 people's worth of intended divinity went through him the wrong way. He fell from the 84th level to the 82nd in front of the whole array, screaming in a voice the honored elder mask had never used in public, then vanished under the collapsing structure. Officially dead. Actually not, because monsters like him always keep one hidden door. We knew about the door. We'd found it weeks ago. We left it open on purpose, and I'll tell you what was waiting on the other side of it in a moment, because it deserves its own paragraph. Forest City paid the bill. 80% of it burned in the ritual's collapse and the Duke's assault. I want to be honest with you. We saved 300,000 and lost a city. That arithmetic still wakes me up some nights, and it should. I saw the ending through a player courier's shared vision, and I've rewatched my copy of it more times than I'll admit. Rhys Blackburn. The royal family's ancestral guardian, riding a projection avatar, 7th peak power in a borrowed frame. He met the fleeing Kaelin in the escape tunnel, and he could have ended him there with one hand, and he deliberately didn't. He beat the shields off him, herded him, bleeding and spell dry, down a route Kaelin believed he was choosing, and out into a small courtyard under the dawn sky where a 15-year-old girl was waiting with her family's sword, Sylvie. Every memory intact of what he'd done while wearing her strings, the Emperor's seal on the execution order in her own handwriting, signed before the battle, in case. Kaelin, cornered, went for the oldest exit in the villain handbook, the final self-destruct, take the girl with him, and mid-gather, a player courier's delivery arrived in Sylvie's hand and she parried his opening claw with the best sword in the village, the glued one, the village joke. 3 full seconds of shock ran through a Tier 7 monster's frame, from a weapon worth less than his shoes. 3 seconds of him violating, unable to detonate, staring at the impossible piece of junk that had ended him. She didn't make a speech. She'd been his puppet. She knew exactly how little he deserved her words. The sword came around once, and Rhys Blackburn, watching his descendant stand over the Empire's greatest traitor, made his own last choice. He dismantled the avatar entirely, poured its 7th peak power down the bloodline into her frame, and by sunrise, the girl who'd been the puppet was the most dangerous royal on the continent, and the ancestor was a voice in the family shrine, sounding satisfied. The quest system paid me a fragment of Kaelin's soul, 100 uses of a Shadow Priest spell kit, mind control, mind steal, memory wipe, the villain of the decade, reduced to 100 charges in my back pocket. I'd say rest in peace, but he wouldn't, and neither would anyone he'd ever met. After the fires, the game paid out growth like an apology. 5 Tier 3 passive Skrulls fell into my rotation, and Star Pointing Hand bought their proficiency straight up to Master, unlocking exclusive evolutions, Phoenix Descent, a firebird the size of a chapel, and later Frozen Tomb, which does to a battlefield what its name promises. My spell list was starting to read less like a mage's kit and more like a weather report for the end of the world. Then, Nolan Village called me home, and the trip rewrote everything I thought I knew about where I'd started. Officially, I went back for the village chief's trials, a quaint local quest chain, and to recharge the best sword in the village, which had earned its pension twice over. The trials were village-flavored to the last. Fetch this. Judge that dispute between 2 farmers about a fence that had been wrong for 40 years. And endure the widow Evelyn, a grown woman who flirted at the village chief with the persistence of siege artillery, parking herself on his porch daily with baked goods and increasingly transparent pretexts, purely, as far as I could tell, to watch an ancient being panic. The chief hid from her behind me twice. Comedy. Rustic. I graded it 5 stars and suspected nothing, which is the whole point of village comedy, as I was about to learn. Then the trials ended and the chief stopped pretending. We were alone in his little house, the same house where he'd once handed me a glued sword with a straight face, and he poured tea, and the tea poured itself the last few centimeters, and the shadows in the room all pointed the same direction, regardless of the fire, and I put my cup down very slowly. "You've been patient with an old man's games," the chief said in the chief's voice, then Evelyn's voice, from the chief's mouth, and polite to a silly widow, then the woodcutters, dry as bark, and generous with boar meat. 3 bodies, 1 being. The village chief, the widow Evelyn, the old woodcutter I'd bribed in week 1, all of them avatars of a fallen goddess named Larea Flo, the name from the Coma dungeon, Clara's ancestor, and the novice villages, all of them, every quaint starter town where millions of players had punched their first chicken, were built on her. Not on her land, on her. Projections raised over the body of a goddess who fell so long ago that her grave grew towns. I stood in the square where I'd auctioned goat loot and recalibrated my entire map of reality. The tutorial zone was a tomb. The tutorial NPCs were the corpse, dreaming. And the corpse had been watching me since day 1, handing me glued swords and quest chains, and had also, apparently, seeded her own bloodline into a grocery shop. I asked the obvious question, why me? Why the glued sword, the trials, the boar meat games, the entire village comedy performance staged for 1 player? Because you looked at a grocery girl, the goddess said, through 3 mouths in turn, and saw what I see, which answered nothing and everything, the way gods bill by the syllable. She wouldn't say more, not about the fall that put her here, not about what she wanted, only that we'd speak again when it mattered, and that I should keep doing exactly what you're doing, which from a fallen deity is either a blessing or a liability waiver. Then the chief handed me a parting gift with a smile carved out of 10,000 years, a group summoning scroll, blank targeting, big capacity. For an emergency, she said in the old man's voice, warehouse shelf, walnut, battery, and now a goddess's blank check. Clara, meanwhile, went from Tier 5 to Tier 6, youngest Saint Domain in recorded history, through a gauntlet of secret realms and a flame hydra's heart that cost me a number I've suppressed. The nobles had run out of things to call her. The soldiers had settled on 1, Marshall. Business rolled on because war is expensive. The snake-slaying operation had been on my board for a month. Oran City's criminal underworld, 7 syndicates deep, fattened by wartime smuggling, and precisely mapped by my player informants because criminals never suspect the cheerful adventurers renting their safe houses. On the chosen night, every den, counting house, and dock warehouse got its door kicked in the same hour. Syndicate bosses waking up to spell light with no one left to call because everyone they'd call was also waking up to spell light. 320 million in seized assets by dawn, 28% distributed to the players who kicked the doors, the rest into the war chest, and Oran's honest merchants threw the empire a festival. Azure Lynx received an advanced unicorn badge from me, burned it, gained 10 world prestige, and founded the 2nd player territory on the continent, state-backed, flag ceremony and all. The badge also carried a 5th trait I hadn't fully read, which caused every NPC he met forever after to form the first impression, idiot. And I want to state formally, for history, that was an accident, mostly. Then the state pointed the whole species at me. A national broadcast asked every player to farm monster materials for vengeance, because the fastest way to give humanity a high-tier defender was to feed me. 100 million people took a deep breath and started grinding on my behalf. There is no way to describe what that feels like. You just try to become worth it. Damon, our runaway city lord, resurfaced with co-conspirators, Duchess Eleanor, and a noble named Franken, in a plot against Clara. It went poorly for them at speed. Azure Wyvern, of all people, had been embedded for weeks as an informant inside the city lord's intelligence office, the gremlin double agent nobody suspected, because who suspects the mascot? Sylvie descended on the conspiracy personally, slapped 3-year soul slavery contracts on Antonidas, Eleanor, and Franken, turning enemy assets into imperial staff, and left Damon for Clara. Clara executed him with a marshal's economy. 1 order, 1 sword. The man who'd hired 500 smiling saboteurs against her city got exactly as much ceremony as he'd paid for. And in the workshops, my long projects matured. The stopwatch part from the Coma dungeon completed its set. Zonia's Hourglass, Gold Legendary, 1 press, 5 seconds of absolute time stop within 100 kilometers, once. 5 seconds in which the entire world holds still, and you don't. I read the tooltip and heard, faintly, every future enemy I would ever meet groaning in advance. The mage tower rose over a Puxi, and its heart, the mana pool, needed a god's touch to reach its ceiling. Fortunately, the war had left a thunder god on the market, an actual weather deity named Tempest, level 83, freshly out of his rebel contract and open to freelance work. His enchantment fee, 4 fragments of Kalen's soul, which I bought from Sylvie at 20 million apiece, and which Tempest wanted for reasons I judged to be none of my business at his tier. He worked on my pool for a day, complaining about mortal masonry the entire time, and left it legendary, 40.1% conversion efficiency, the finest material to mage funnel outside a divine realm. Even dead, that old snake Kalen was still paying reparations, in installments, by the shard. The tower turned material into me. That was its whole job. Kira sorted monster parts by the ton, the pool refined them into pure mana. I sat in it and drank. Tier 2 to Tier 3 in 2.5 days. Tier 4, level 60, 5 days later. The 100 million grinder shipments arrived by caravan and left through my pores. On top of it, 5 bottles of Pangu root potion upgraded my body's template from normal to elite, health and mana multiplied by 7, and my experience battery crossed 50 million banked. I'd like to tell you it felt like power. It mostly felt like homework at planetary volume, with the occasional out-of-body moment when I'd catch my reflection mid-cast and think, that man could duel a duke. Then Kira would yell that the next ton of Hydra glands had arrived, and the Duke dueling man would go do receiving paperwork. Pearl City needed a supply run, and the quest sheet rated the route extremely hazardous, so I made the run a flex. 15 of my territory's Tier 4 talents as escort, the full brochure of Apuxi's talent program walking in formation around some grain wagons. The first bandit crew to scout us sent one man up a ridge with a spyglass, and we watched him count auras, lower the spyglass, look at it, raise it again, and then the entire ambush packed up and left the profession. Word ran down the route ahead of us. By day 3, toll bridges were waving us through for free with refreshments, rating SSS for a delivery. The quest system has never respected me more. And in Pearl City's records, I found a discrepancy that made my past life memory itch. The City Lord roster didn't match my mental archive. Serena Caldwell held a seat she'd never held in my timeline. My past life's roster had her elsewhere, and it had her loyal. My guild analyst, a player named Range is Truth, suggested the retro prediction method, comparing my archive against the present like two ledgers, and the mismatch analysis said one thing: Michelle was bought. A betrayal that hadn't happened yet, sitting in the books, waiting. I marked it and kept the marker to myself. Some traps you leave armed to see who steps in them. Then the elves called, and I answered, because their forests held two things I needed: a legend's insignia and a heart. The elven kingdom was dying of a disease called plantification. Elves slowly turning into trees, from the fingers inward, bark where skin was, roots through the royal family itself, whole groves in their capital that used to be families. Their healers had spent a decade failing at it because they were treating it as a curse, and it grieves me to report that a decade of the world's best restoration magic was aimed at the wrong noun. It wasn't a curse, it was a weapon. An engineered undead virus, brewed by a human noble, Duchess Ashworth, seeded through trade goods and, in my past life, the formula and the culprit both surfaced years too late to matter. I arrived with the cure sheet already memorized, which created a scene I'll keep forever. The Elven Court's grand healers presenting a decade of case files, and the foreign scholar flipping to the third page, tapping one symptom cluster and saying, "This is necromantic, not botanical, and here's the counterformula," and an entire civilization's medical establishment going through the 5 stages of grief in a single meeting. The first cured elf wept green tears. So did the healers. So, nearly, did the foreign scholar, but he had a reputation. The regent's gratitude came in tears, a trade permit no human had held in a century, a contract to deliver the heart of the world tree, a boss-grade template material, in 1 month, and the Moon God clan insignia, legendary quality. 3 attached skills, a Moon God phantom that fought beside you, Starfall, which is a meteor shower with my name on the invoice, and Elven Call. Evidence against Duchess Ashworth went to Sylvie by fast courier, and the Duchess's story ended the way stories end when both an empress and an elven regent co-sign the epilogue. They also tried very hard to keep me. Feasts, honors, increasingly creative diplomatic packaging around the concept of stay forever. I signed the trade papers, complimented the wine, and left with my skill bar glowing because I had a war to get back to and a strict policy against being adopted by kingdoms. One more shopping result from that stretch: a 7-piece gold epic armor set called the Lighthouse Sudden Chill set, whose set bonus summoned a giant. A lighthouse-sized construct the players immediately named King Kong. My loadout was now a mage, a moon goddess, a meteor shower, and a kaiju. Balanced, as all things should be. And then there was no more prep left to do because the Duke's remnants and their foreign backers had gathered everything they had, and the war came to Oran City to be decided. The final battle was the kind history painters lie about. It wasn't banners and sunlight. It was 40 hours of streets changing hands, artillery weather, smoke you could bite, and 500,000 people on each side finding out what the other 500,000 had trained for. I fought it like a man possessed because I was a man possessed, and I'll tell you what possessed me in a minute. The Rebel Magician Legion massed for a bombardment formation on the eastern approach, 300 casters in ranked circles, and I opened Starfall over them and watched meteors land in their geometry like fists in a chessboard. Their survivors reformed, professionals, give them that, and the Moon God Phantom came down the lane I'd cleared and unmade the reforming. On the southern wall, King Kong, my lighthouse giant, waded through their siege line, drawing every ballista on that front purely by being the biggest insult available, while I deleted the actual threats behind him: the enchanters, the banner casters, the officers with communication artifacts. Merit chimed with every kill. My counter passed 186,000 and I stopped reading it. I also died once, and I earned it. Hour 30-something, hovering over a broken plaza, allowing myself one deep breath of how well it was all going. An archer phalanx I'd catalogued as broken had reassembled under a sergeant with a voice like a whip and 1,000 bows released on one timing. The sky where I gloated became a porcupine. Dead before I finished the thought, back in half an hour, ears ringing, ego bleeding, straight back into the line. Because players respawn, and that is still, forever, the most broken spell in this game, and the rebels had no answer to a man who treats death as a coffee break. Serena Caldwell chose that battle to spend her betrayal, defecting with Pearl City's experts at the worst possible hour, exactly as my ledger trap predicted, which is why her surprise flanking force arrived to find its designated targets already repositioned and its secret route pre-scouted, and treason at list price turned out to buy a lot less than advertised. The enemy raised the stakes anyway, with imports, an orc high priest whose chants curdled the air, an orc sword saint, the thunder god himself, back under a rebel contract with zero loyalty and excellent rates, and a foreign prince named Joran IV. That Joran. The love letter Joran come to avenge a correspondence. Overhead, the true heavyweights cancelled out. An astral cat called Irene, star-furred and vast, and the dragon emperor Bahamut circled each other at altitude, two catastrophes agreeing to a mutual restraining order, their stalemate the only reason the city below still had architecture. And take note of the name Irene, cat, astral, unreasonably powerful. The universe was foreshadowing at me, and I was too busy to read it. Our line bent, tier 6s fell, and I reached into the warehouse and pulled the goddess's blank check. The group summoning scroll, cast at the highest setting, targeting 3 specific villagers. The village chief, the widow Evelyn, the woodcutter. They arrived mid-battlefield in their homespun clothes, 3 elderly rustics blinking in the smoke, and the enemy had half a second to wonder if I'd misclicked. Then the 3 walked into each other. Larea Flo stood up out of her own avatars, a fallen goddess assembled at last, 10 kilometers of presence folded into a woman-shaped patience, and the battlefield went quiet the way a forest goes quiet before weather. She looked around at what had been done to her descendants' empire. Then she snapped her fingers. The orc high priest ceased. Another snap, the sword saint. The 2 rebel dukes, the architects of 30 years of civil war, the men whole armies had failed to reach, got 1 snap each, and the war was over. Not one. Over, like a parent turning off a television. She held the field for exactly as long as it took, said something to Sylvie that made an empress bow to the grass, gave me 1 nod, the kind that files you somewhere, and folded away. The cleanup lasted days, the celebration weeks, but I spent hour 1 in the military merit shop, because that was the thing that had possessed me all battle. I'd opened the shop's catalog on day 1 to price my rewards, scrolled past the standard fare, equipment, potions, land warrants, and stopped dead at a listing that, I verified with 3 other players, did not exist on anyone else's screen, visible only to my account. Keyed to my quest history, Clara's blood, the gilding resource. Her family had banked drops of it with the Imperial Quartermaster across generations, and merit could buy them out. I purchased 228 drops on the spot, learned there were roughly 600 in total holding, and set my merit farming schedule for the rest of the war accordingly. I also burned 65 drops gilding the moon god insignia to gold, which hurt, 65 failures worth of a legend's inheritance, and worth it. Then Dawn Shard hatched, and the story grew its second heart. Now, you've already met Dawn Shard in this story, the vast, starlit deer who one-shotted a vampire elder, the being who patrolled the princess's questline like a landmark. That was her old self, her full self. Before events in the Divine Tiers I only learned about later cost her that body. What survived came down to the mortal world as an egg. The campaign's reward chain routed it to me. Gold legendary, dormant, refusing every incubation until Clara's blood gilded it viable. And if you're keeping track of how often Clara's bloodline turns out to be the missing ingredient in a miracle, yes, so was I. What came out of the egg was a cat. Blue-white, palm-sized, fur full of actual starlight, and the complete personality of the ancient cosmic entity now inconveniently kitten-shaped. Her first act was to inspect me. Her second was to approve, conditionally, pending snacks. The contract that formed between us was an equal contract, the system's own term, and she made me read that word aloud, twice, and once more for the room. Her stat sheet was a roadmap of absurdity, 9 forms locked behind levels, a leader template, and a diet, listed, I am not joking, as experience crystal stones. The battery I'd been filling for months was cat food. 100,000 experience took her from level 1 to level 2 while I watched my savings account become kibble. And then I logged off with the contract rune warm on my hand, stood in my apartment in Donghai City, and called her. She came through. A cat from a game, sitting on my real bed, physically displacing real air, judging my real curtains. She looked around my apartment, the first New World creature to see Earth, the first proof that the wall between worlds had a door in it, and delivered her verdict on human civilization. It's small. Where's the food? Living with a star cat came with a rulebook she dictated in installments. No touching the tail, no touching the belly, actually no touching the legs either, only the head, and even the head required an application in triplicate. I pounced and petted her anyway, on the theory, proven correct within a minute, that cats across all planes of existence protest exactly until the petting is good. She melted, purred, then informed me with her eyes closed that I was forgiven this once due to my youthful ignorance. Then she woke up my first morning as a pet owner, delivering a message from her boss that reorganized the war. Larea Flo, it turned out, wasn't just a fallen goddess with real estate issues. She was an assistant to the time-space administrator of both worlds, which is a job title that raises approximately 400 questions, and she had 2 announcements. First, the time flow between wallets, 12 game hours per real hour, was unfair, and she was considering a patch. A goddess, patching time. Second, the big one, creatures from the game world, having crossed into reality, could resurrect. 10 times. 24 hours per tier of power, up to 8 days for the strongest. After 10 deaths, banned from our world forever. Sit with that the way I had to. Every high-tier ally I could pull across the wall came with 10 lives. A suicide charge from a game world expert wasn't a sacrifice anymore, it was a tactic with a cooldown timer. Celeste had traded her 1 life to stop Kaylin. Imagine what our side could do with volunteers who got theirs back. Lao Cheng came upstairs to meet the cat within the hour, sensed the implications faster than I could brief them, and had the relevant department reshaping national strategy by that evening. Dawn Shard, for her part, cleared quarantine, negotiated an outdoor radius of 3 kilometers, and spent our curfew ghost hunts as the finest detection instrument on the planet, a 2-kilometer ghost radar wrapped in fur. 61 ghosts in 7 hours, 1 grilled fish dinner as her fee, saved lives beyond counting. Then she discovered smartphones, and I lost her to the internet. She registered her paw print in my fingerprint lock. She played mobile games until 4 in the morning. She got so good at a MOBA playing the magical cat hero that her teammates typed, "Nice cat," and she typed back, "I am literally a cat," and got reported for trolling. When I bought her a flagship phone, she licked my neck once, tariff paid in full, and vanished into the feed. Somewhere in the astral plane, her ancestors were weeping, or scrolling, probably scrolling. Back in the game, Sylvie closed the war's ledger with a gift that broke my internal price scale. I'd asked at the quest turn-in for a large space ring and a fragment of Kaylin's soul. Reasonable requests, quartermaster requests. She refused both with a smile, said they weren't worthy of the merit, and walked down from her throne unclasping a necklace from her own neck. A royal heirloom, 1,000 years old, forged by the first empress with a nation's resources. A sapphire like a caught star. The chain of the blue flower plane. Legendary. Reputation with the Empire permanently fixed at revered. Spatial mastery boosted, 2 combat skills attached, and the trait that mattered, an entire damaged plane folded inside it. 1.36 square kilometers of storage. Not a bag of holding, a country of holding. This is too valuable, I said, because someone in the room had to. Take it to a rival empire, she agreed, and they'd trade you 1/5 of a great city for it. Then she fastened it on me anyway, taught me the activation phrase in Elvish, and told me to use it well, win my other war, and come back alive to keep using it. If you want to understand this Empress, that sentence is the whole portrait. She'd calculated the necklace's worth to the last coin, and given it away anyway, because the things she actually valued didn't fit in vaults. There was still 1 war left on the invoice, the traitor nations. During the Civil War, the small kingdoms and federations of the Western continent had defected to the rebels wholesale, and the crown's finances were 40 to 50 billion in the red. Sylvie's instruction had the elegance of a guillotine. Go west with Clara and confiscate the traitor's price of betrayal from their royals and great nobles, not the commoners. I added the clause myself, no taxing the peasants to refill noble vaults for the next decade, and she approved it, because we both read the same history books, just from different sides of them. At the War Council, a senior advisor named Lansty raised his hand against my no taxing the peasants clause, with the patient air of a man explaining rain to children. If the nobles pass the costs to their commoners, they pass them. Why should we care about the lives of peasants in other countries? We have our benefits. I asked him what happened to the Empress's stated philosophy of governance in that plan. We needed the commoners during the war, he explained kindly, veteran to newcomer. The war is over. Who needs them now? Around the tent, a dozen generals nodded along, and there it was. The oldest rot in every victorious army, 4 weeks old and already comfortable. You're relieved, I said. Senior advisor Lansty, go home and reflect on where exactly you went wrong. He laughed, waiting for the joke. Clara stood, confirmed the dismissal in her marshal's voice, and Briar's ceremonial sword provided the punctuation. Lance left the tent at a speed his dignity never caught up with. Then I asked whether anyone else had thoughts on the welfare of commoners, and the tent, as one man, discovered it had always, deeply, since childhood, loved commoners. The campaign plan was a heist, not a war. The Federation's capital, Hai'an City, sat on the continent's far coast, its ports the escape route for every noble fortune in the west. March overland and the wealth would sail ahead of us. So we didn't march. Antonidas, our contractually acquired archmage, mass teleported 10,000 players 3,700 kilometers in one casting, straight into Hai'an's central square, while I flew in with 3 Tier 7s and 23 Tier 6s as the world's most overdressed collection notice. The night before, on my orders, the assassin Cecilia Nightblade had followed a courier into the Speaker's own fortress, and I'd asked her for intelligence, just intelligence, and what she brought me instead was the kind of timing poets fake. Speaker Derek of the Hills Federation was literally mid-treason when she decloaked, pen still wet on his reply to an enemy emperor's recruitment letter. Sincerely yours, the man selling his suzerain. Cecilia killed the courier, killed the bodyguard mage in the wall alcove, took the letter from the speaker's hand, and when the city's 83 high-tier experts rose into the night to demand explanations, she projected the letter onto the clouds. 10,000 square meters of a man's own handwriting, convicting him above his own skyline. The experts read it. Their auras dimmed one by one, the aerial equivalent of a courtroom looking at its shoes, and I watched from below with my arms crossed, savoring my favorite weather, moral high ground with a chance of confiscation. Then, she executed him in front of all of them, tossed the two halves aside like packaging, and asked if anyone objected. The Federation's Tier 7 patriarch, Mosby Gasang, oldest and strongest being in the West, developed a sudden and profound fascination with the horizon. Then, 10,000 players raided the richest city on the continent, and I want the record to show it was the most organized crime in history. Teams of 50, maps of every noble district copied from the Imperial Library and memorized in advance. Division of labor by specialty. Vault crews, appraisal crews, haulage crews. Per item contribution rewards, posted transparently, converting at 1,000 to 1 into coins. Azure Lynx cracked 12 secret vaults in 3 hours, and by Vault 8 he'd stopped calling for the Saint Domain warrior to break the locks and was picking them himself, a druid speedrunning a rogue's career. Red Eyes tore apart the family study panel by panel, narrating finds to the guild channel like a nature documentary. An entire team stormed the Goblin Bank in formation, singing an anthem, and left it empty to the last coin with the tellers politely thanked. And from the Gasang family's deepest vault, a red dragon egg surfaced into the daylight, lava-shelled, priceless, to the sound of the whole hovering sky gasping at once, and Mosby Gasang's face doing something geological. 21 billion in confiscated value by nightfall, more than half my quest target, 1 city, 1 day. And then I did the thing I'm actually proud of. I looked up at the furious, humiliated, extremely armed local experts hovering overhead and offered them a franchise. Join us against the other trader nations, 70-30 split, our 70. Use your 30 to become the strongest kingdom in the West while your rivals get harvested. Mosby Gasang stroked his beard through every stage of grief and landed, as the strong always land, on arithmetic. If we do this, he said, every neighbor will hate us. I asked him what a country's most important asset was. He declined to guess. National strength, I told him. Take your 30%, buy yourselves a legend or two, and let the neighbors hate you from below. They said yes. Of course they said yes. Greed is the only diplomacy that never needs a translator. The Federation's fleets closed the ocean escape routes. Their 200,000 troops joined the sweep under player supervision, 1 player auditor per 100 soldiers, because I trust incentives and audit everything. And the Western continent's nobility spent 2.5 months learning that the bill for treason compounds. The sweep itself became a season. Kingdom by kingdom, duchy by duchy, the players arrived with maps and manors, confiscated everything above a threshold, and left the commoners untouched. And I made sure the untouched part was loud. In every capital, I broadcast the same clause over the rooftops. Nobles may not recoup their losses from the peasants, not for a decade, and if they try, the empire returns. The Lumen King, Last Domino, tried to lecture me about sovereign tax policy from beneath our assembled Tier 7s, got 2 sentences in, and I cut him off mid-treaty citation and told his entire capital, at magical volume, to write to the Empress personally if their taxes rose. His face did the thing where outrage and survival negotiate. Survival won. It always wins in kings. It's the whole job description. The Western commoners started leaving flowers where our columns passed. Confiscation armies do not usually get flowers. I'm still proud of the flowers. Final tally, 336.7 billion, 11 times the target. The reveal at court was the best money I never spent. Finance Minister Brian jogged up to us the moment we entered the hall, gray at the temples from months of deficit math. The campaign, Lord Vengeance. How was the campaign? Can it offset the debt? I put on the face of a man returning from a funeral, sighed, and held up 3 fingers. 3 billion? His brow folded. That's too little. I didn't say 3 billion. 300 million. The man grabbed his own chest. Behind him, an entire ministry began mentally drafting reimbursement letters, and several ministers looked at me with the sorrow of people who'd endorsed the profit and gotten the loss. Not 300 million either, I said, and let one more heartbeat pass. 300 billion. 336.7 to be exact, 11 times the target. The hall dropped its documents. Physically, there's a specific sound a ministry makes when it stops being bankrupt, and it's paper hitting marble. Then a finance minister speaking in tongues about founding ceremonies and reconstruction budgets. And on the throne, Sylvie, enjoying it exactly as much as I was, because she'd known the number for weeks and told no one. The Empress and I share a sense of humor. Her ministers deserve raises. Sylvie awarded Clara and me 10 billion each. The players got their contribution payouts, 20,000 coins average, and the redistribution plan Azure Lynx drafted, capping the gap between whale hauls and small assignments, held the whole community together through it. Somewhere in there, the entire western map opened for exploration, and my guild chat became a stampede of dungeon first kill hunters. Good, let them grow. I'd need every one of them stronger than they knew. One evening near the end of it, with the last palace inventoried and the players off hunting dungeon first kills across a freshly opened continent, Clara declared the war over by grabbing my sleeve and hauling me 30 kilometers to a waterfall she'd spotted on the march. Marshal of the Empire, conqueror of the West, kidnapping a duke to look at water. It was good water, to be fair, 20 meters of it, hammering a lake into silver. We lay on the grass chewing stems like the whole campaign belonged to somebody else, and she asked what the loot totals were, and I told her, and she did the general math out loud with her eyes closed, deficits erased, surplus for schools. The princess is going to make that face she makes, and grinned at the sky. She talked about after. First time I'd heard her do it. No interest in the marshal staff, none in her new duchy. Titles are just heavier aprons. She wanted to take her father and little sister and see the world slowly, every waterfall on the continent. And when she got tired of traveling, she said, she'd settle in a Pouxie if her lord would have her, and the system chimed a formal request over her shoulder, like a notary with no sense of moment. Gold tier talent wishes to join your territory. I accepted before the chime finished. Then she went quiet and gave me the badge. A plain communication badge, commissioned from the royal archmage on her own coin. Push mana into it from any world, and she'd know where I was, and come. Your world's invasion is going to get worse before it gets better, she said, watching the water. When it does, call. I'll finish my travels later. Some things reschedule. I've been handed artifacts by gods and empresses. The badge from the grocery girl is the one I checked my pocket for every day after. The coronation closed the era, and Sylvie ran it like everything she ran, by breaking the correct rules on purpose. Tradition said the ceremony belonged at the palace altar, sealed among ancestors and nobles. She moved it to the central plaza so any commoner with working legs could watch, and they came the night before to claim standing room, 1 million of them by morning, packed to the rooftops. I rode in the honor procession behind her carriage with Clara, both of us in enough medals to short out a compass, waving at citizens who screamed our names, and I kept thinking about the version of history where this girl's story was a footnote, and how thoroughly my footnote had eaten the book. The ancestral rite came first, a 20-meter totem raised in the square, the power imprints of every past emperor pouring down into their heir in ropes of colored light, and mid-blessing, live, in front of everyone, she broke through to Tier 5 on the platform itself, the ancestors' welcome gift arriving as raw ascension. I felt the pressure shift from my spot in the honor row and grinned like an idiot in full regalia. The crowd's roar moved the pigeons 3 districts over. Then Archmage Shallan approached with the crown, as Archmages had crowned this dynasty for centuries, magic anointing power, the proper order of things. Sylvie took the crown out of Shallan's hands and set it on her own head, power, bestowed by herself, upon herself, with the whole continent watching. The noble rose gasped like one punctured organism. The commons detonated. Hats went up in such quantity, the plaza briefly had weather. And the girl who'd been a puppet 6 months ago stood under her own crown, 15 years old, and told 1 million people, I am your undisputed empress, and not one soul in that square disputed it. I stood in the honor row with dozens of medals on my chest thinking, I have seen the best moment of this timeline, and I helped pay for it, and both of those facts are going on my tombstone. Clara was made Duke of Pearl City, a political maneuver so tidy I applauded, since she'd already told the Empress she planned to resign and travel, meaning the duchy would revert to the crown after honoring her in front of everyone. I was made Duke and Minister of Foreign Trade, plus a medal called the Glory of Blackburn, whose 5th listed trait was a self-destruct dealing 10 times my maximum health in holy damage. I read that trait twice, looked up at the Empress, and she looked back with a face of perfect ceremonial innocence. The woman had given me a suicide vest as a graduation gift. Keep the warehouse list running. Walnut, battery, blank check spent, badge, hourglass, and now a state-issued self-detonation. This will all matter. Every single item. The month between coronation and departure, I spent becoming a space mage, and my tutor was a war prize. Antonidas, the enemy's great teleporter, was serving out his soul contract sentence in imperial custody, and the first time he saw the chain of the blue flower plane on my neck, the man's staff creaked in his grip like a ship in a storm. The necklace, it turns out, is the graduation artifact of the entire space element discipline, the thing his whole school dreams of studying, and it was hanging on a foreigner who had never cast a space spell in his life. He called it a waste of heaven's treasures through his teeth, then offered to teach me from the absolute basics in exchange for my lobbying to shorten his sentence. And I have never seen a man pour so much grief into such excellent pedagogy. Under his teaching and the necklace's learning bonus, I ate the space school in weeks. Enhanced blink, no cooldown, chain castable until the body gives out, 13 short jumps back to back before my joints filed a protest. Portal, teleportation arrays, and the crown jewel, his own signature, the group teleportation array, armies through a doorway of light. Somewhere in there he asked, hollowly, whether I planned to master in 1 month what took him 60 years, and I told him the truth, that I had an excellent teacher, and watching a proud archmage try to hold flattered and devastated on the same face is a memory I'll keep warm forever. The expansion went out with a festival, the Illusionary Duel, a battle royale event, 100 players per map, stats normalized to a baseline so equipment whales and day 1 legends fought on level ground. 40 minutes, 1 survivor advances, 200 million entrants. I sat it out, posted a noble statement about not wanting to demoralize anyone, and privately admit to you what I admitted to no forum. With stats equalized, my one non-purchasable attribute is luck, and my luck stat is 13, out of numbers that go much higher. I know when a casino is aimed at me, so I watched the stream from my mage tower with Dawn Shard and a bag of dried fish, and the event delivered everything. Azure Lynx streamed his run, first stream of his life, stated purpose, an instructional PvP video for druids, and the universe punished the hubris immediately. He spawned into round 2's town map, and before he'd taken 2 steps, a random NPC child pointed at him and told her mother, "Look, an idiot," on stream, because of my badge's cursed 5th trait. The mother started to scold her, looked at him and said, "Never mind, he does." The chat has never recovered. Neither, frankly, have I. The run itself was a clinic, and I watched every minute of it from my mage tower, cultivating with one eye and commentating for a cat with the other. Round 1, he dismantled a top 50 assassin, dodging her backstab by hopping sideways into the exact spot her recovery left open. Druid claws on a metronome, and I said, "Watch his feet," to Dawn Shard like a proud uncle. Then, round 2 dealt him the server's only martial artist, Ever Sober, and their duel was a masterpiece of mutual paranoia. They met early, agreed it would be unsporting to fight while Azure Lynx held a kill buff, and split up to farm, which is what respect looks like between apex predators, and also what buying time looks like, and both of them knew both things. Except Ever Sober didn't farm kills. He'd noticed you could talk to the map's NPCs, unearthed the town's hidden quests, and spent the round upgrading a wine gourd into something that ate people. At the final confrontation, he squeezed a quest herb into the gourd, said, essentially, "Behold," and the gourd inhaled Azure Lynx off the street like noodle soup. Chat wrote the obituary in real time. Except the thing in the gourd was a dream clone from Azure Lynx's necklace, swapped in the last half second, and the real leopard was already behind him with claws out. 2/3 of a health bar later, Ever Sober hopped back, cupped his fist, said "well played," tapped an acupoint on his own chest, and dissolved with total dignity, a man conceding a chess game he'd been playing with cookware. Then round 3 fed Azure Lynx to the wood chipper, and the wood chipper was ours. Azure Wyvern, our gremlin. I recognized her wolf's howl through the stream audio before the chat had a theory, and told Dawn Shard, "That's ours. Watch this," with what I can only describe as preemptive smugness. The map was a moonlit primeval forest, which the chat called Azure Lynx's home field for about 90 seconds, until the howl. She'd spawned next to 2 loot monsters, killed both inside a dozen seconds with her moon-buffed wolf and her borrowed divine panda. Yes, she had borrowed Ever Sober's panda, the girl network, and snowballed 3 pieces of event gear before most players had finished looking around. Then she went fishing with her own pet, and I narrated the scam to Dawn Shard in real time, because I'd taught this child economy of effort, and here was my curriculum, weaponized. The wolf howled, and 20 players read it as a monster and walked into her kill zone in polite single file, and she sniped them at her leisure from shadow, stacking buffs. When the walk-ins dried up, she had the wolf fake a dying whale, injured boss edition, and a second wave came running for the loot, Azure Lynx among them, arriving just in time to see a small archer on wolfback, wreathed in 12 stacks of blood-colored light, turn and notice him specifically. He had 3 stacks, she had 12, 3 event items, a moon wolf at plus 50%, and a panda whose taunt yanked him out of his own escape. His mechanics were better. Her everything else was 115% more. She ran down the second strongest player in the game like he owed her lunch money. Afterward, I told her who the golden leopard had been. She typed, "So that's why he was slightly hard." I forwarded it to Azure Lynx without commentary. His reply was an ellipsis long enough to have a zip code. She won the entire event. Final round, 200-some survivors, no streams allowed, and she came out of the blackout with a 1 health point reversal kill on a top 10 assassin and the crown. 200 million entrants, 1 feral archer, 5 bottles of Pangu root potion as the grand prize, and a new forum title I did not coin and cannot stop, the titled Battle Lowly. Under my mana pool's supervision, she drank them into an elite template, 6.5 times health, a petrifying arrow rain skill from the catalyst material, and the undisputed number 2 power seat on the server, 14 years old. The Pinky Promise was ahead of schedule. The event also produced the server's official unluckiest man. Lao Kang, the State Guild's archer, drew a 1 in 2 million matchup and met Ever Sober in round 1 before the gourd, when the martial artist was simply an unsolvable kung fu problem, and went home with the 100-coin participation prize. When he reported this to his team, every one of them, including 2 decorated officers, physically stepped away from him to avoid catching the luck. He left shouting that hidden classes should be banned and that everyone present was dead to him. The forum crowned him the African King of Bad Fortune, a title he holds to this day, undefeated, which is itself a kind of luck. The only cloud on the stream was a small one, cat-shaped. Dawn Shard looked at the event's masked host, the illusionary envoy, stopped chewing, and said, "I know that thing." Illusionary bugs, creatures her home plane's astral birds would cross a dying dimension to eat, appearing openly on this world's main stage. "If the astral birds find out," she said, "they'll invade. I guarantee it." I remembered the 8th expansion's name from my past life, Astral Invasion, and put another pin in the map of everything that was coming. The new expansion's cinematic dropped that midnight, Clash of Kings. 2 rival empires declaring war on the newly crowned Sylvie, and a betrayal my past life never contained. Grand Admiral Malachi defecting to the enemy with the entire Royal Navy. The timeline wasn't just diverging anymore, it was writing new villains custom. I gave the player base one advisory post on the new races and classes, watched the servers crash under the discussion traffic, and then went dark, because my own clock had run out. The trip I'd been bribing an alien inspector toward, one video download at a time, was booked. Destination, Skrulls. Departure, as soon as I hit Tier 6. The breakthrough was a 2-world production. In reality, I stood at the recovered Linglu Spring Eye with Lao Chung and Chancellor Tao as honor guard, 2 dead emperors on bodyguard duty, and when the spring erupted 5-colored at the moment of crossing, Dongzuo flicked a black inkstone into the air to cap the overflow, while Lao Chung handed protective bracelets to the watching officials like a grandfather distributing candy. I jumped into the Spring Eye itself for the finale. There are worse fonts to be baptized in. In the game, simultaneously, Archmage Shalon supervised my mage tower as I fed the mana pool the blue dragon Scotty's heart, and, gulp, the heart of the world tree, the boss template material an entire elven kingdom had owed me. The tower froze, cracked, screamed, shot a pillar of 5-colored light through its own roof, and Shalon froze the entire building in emergency ice, twice, to keep my real estate assembled. Then the pillar burst and rained beneficial energy over the whole city. 30,000 free experience per resident, minor illnesses cured in the streets, players leveling mid-sentence like it was a public holiday, which it immediately, officially, became. I came out the other side a Tier 6 Saint Domain mage with a boss template, health and mana times 15. The Empire's Tier 7s flew over to congratulate me and casually noted that none of them could have afforded my breakfast. Sorry, my breakthrough materials. Gifts stacked up. A library rune from Archmage Alden, unlimited access to the Silver Pine Spire spell archive, the exact item I'd once ground a month of miserable dailies for in a previous life, handed over now with a smile and a bow. And if you think I didn't feel that in my soul, you've never redeemed a grind. An astral salmon from the mercenary legend Gareth, which made a cat scream with joy 2 worlds away and commandeer my territory's epic tier chef within the hour, and a legendary assassin's badge from Cecilia, strength and agility scaling with darkness, backstab resets, plus a summon Cecilia for 2 minutes trait, the entire assassin class's dream item, bound untradeable to a mage. I posted its stats to the forum purely to inflict emotional damage on the assassin class. The thread hit 6 figures of replies in an hour, a chorus of grief with the recurring phrase, "Waste of a heavenly treasure." One warrior commenting that his immersion in assassin suffering was so complete he'd gotten angry on their behalf. It worked, it was cruel, and I'd do it again before breakfast. Then a week of cramming in the Silver Pine Library, and the cramming had a supply chain. Learning spells from books runs on inspiration, and inspiration, it turns out, is purchasable. I sent a guild player named Luminous Biohazard shopping for cognition potions, and the man came back vibrating with the deal of his life. He'd bypassed the shops, found the master alchemist himself drowning in gambling debts, and bought the whole order at cost, plus a crumpled half-price list of the master's remaining stock that included several outright divine brews. I bought the list. All of it. Then I gave Nuclear Wastewater's team 30% of the savings as commission, which came to 60,000 coins a head, roughly 100 times their weekly income, and the man tried to salute me with tears in his eyes. Find the indebted genius. Overpay your scouts. 2 rules, no exceptions. 160 bottles of wisdom elixirs later, I was comprehending high-tier magic at 5 times speed, spell notifications chiming through the library's quiet hours like a slot machine paying out. By week's end, my list held every ice spell through Tier 6, including 2 forbidden spells, Absolute Zero and Cold Abyss. Forbidden as in, the Empire files paperwork when they're cast. I had 2. Filed under, Souvenirs for Skrulls. Last stop before departure, Gilding. Azure Wyvern, our champion and the luckiest hands on the planet, spent an afternoon in the library turning my loadout gold with Clara's blood. 155 drops for what should have cost 500. The necklace plane, the soul fragment, the hourglass, the wand, the potion, even the sorrow of the fungus, all gilded, all real-world capable now. She was quiet while she worked, which for her is a fire alarm. When I told her the mission timeline, a week, maybe more, she nodded at her enchanting panel and said, "Come back alive." Everyone always says that to you, but actually do it. The gremlin, out of jokes. That's how I knew the trip was as dangerous as I'd priced it. One more errand, and it was the loudest errand in Imperial history. Malachi, the admiral who'd stolen the navy, was lounging in occupied Haiyan City, untouchable behind enemy lines, outside Imperial territory, which mattered because my beautiful state-issued self-destruct medal only worked on Imperial soil, so I changed what counted as Imperial soil. Mosby Gazang, our 70-30 business partner, heard the proposal, looked at the 2 of us, and signed the paper with the shortest turnaround in diplomatic history. Haiyan City, transferred to the Blackburn Empire, ownership duration, 1 month. A city leased like a party venue for the specific purpose of making one man legally explodable. unbelievable. The contract flare went up over the embassy district like a golden firework, and somewhere across the continent, a traitor admiral felt nothing at all, which was the point. Then the group teleport, my own casting this time. The spell dropped me, Sylvie, and Antonidas onto Hyan's streets to the open-mouthed delight of the local players, whose theories in world chat ranged from hidden quest to, and I quote, elopement. Sylvie unveiled her full 7th peak pressure over the city. Every collaborator's blood went cold in the same second. One spirit scan later, she pointed at a manor in the noble quarter where a banquet had just lost its guest of honor through a side window. I chased Malachi's fleeing aura on a dozen chained blinks, caught him over his own garden wall, and stood in the air between him and the rest of his life. "Hello there, traitor," I said, and pressed the metal. 10 times my boss template health, in holy damage. The noble quarter grew a 2-kilometer golden mushroom cloud with both of us at the stem, and Malachi didn't get a last sentence, which I regret 0 amount. He'd spent his allotment of sentences ordering a navy to kneel. Sylvie ice-walled the civilian districts from the shockwave herself, a wall 10 meters high across the whole city, then announced over the burning noble quarter that this, exactly this, was the market price of betraying Blackburn, and the commons of an occupied enemy city cheered her, cheered the invader. That's what a decade of taxing them into gravel buys you, an audience for your enemies. The strategic dividend outlived the crater. The enemy empire's generals convened to discuss one fact. The suicide bomber respawns, ran the projections on their own unprotectable leadership, and pulled their entire front line back into a defensive crouch. 1 medal, 1 traitor, 1 week of the whole invasion frozen while their tier 7s argued about bodyguard rotations. Me? I got a 7-day game ban, standard self-destruct penalty, which was fine. I had a flight to catch. The travel agency for interstellar suicide missions was a sleepy alien in silk pajamas. Donna, the game inspector's sister. Holy Silver Federation, blue skin, horns, a tail she was touchy about, and the energy of a grad student who considered our entire species an interruption of her nap. For a fee of psionic energy, she'd teleport 3 passengers to Skrull Star, me, Chancellor Cao, and Lao Cheng, each of us carrying hundreds of tons of precious metals as trade capital, because Skrull banks don't take our currency, but gold is gold in every galaxy. The departure lounge was her villa's basement, dominated by a black machine the size of a truck, and she ran the briefing in pajamas between yawns while a state convoy delivered her fee, canisters of psionic energy, to the driveway upstairs. 3 items. 1. Destination random. Could be a city, could be a volcano, could be the open ocean, could be, direct quote, the jaws of something legendary. No refunds, though statistically, we'd probably get Wasteland. 2. The return window opened on day 7 and closed on day 10. Activate the jade pendants she tossed us, come home, or wait a month for the next bus. 3. And here she held up a 3rd finger, opened her mouth, visibly decided against whatever the 3rd rule was, and replaced it with, have a pleasant trip, which remains the single most ominous customer service sentence I have ever received, and I've worked in sales. She cranked the machine to maximum, space turned into taffy, and the last thing I saw of my home planet was a blue alien in silk pajamas pulling Ling Tao out of the room by the wrist so she could go back to sleep. She also tossed me a hand-drawn treasure map she'd pulled from an Academy loot box and couldn't be bothered to use. Mountains, a river, a big red X, 0 text. I gave it to the 2 seniors to memorize. Remember the lazy woman's map, top shelf of the warehouse. The teleport scrambled me like an egg. I woke up face down in an alien desert with Dawn Shard standing on my cheek, announcing she'd been stomping my face for 10 minutes and billing me for the labor. Overhead, the sky was purple. Wrong. Every Skrull Star image from my past life showed blue sky. This purple was new and churning, and I filed it under concerning until a news broadcast explained it and I had to sit down. The purple was mine. The floating island I'd nuked via cargo manifest 2 months ago from another planet had detonated so much volatile psionic energy that it dyed the entire planet's atmosphere. Their capital was a disaster zone. Their god-tier expert had barely caught the falling island and now kept it sealed under a barrier 40 kilometers from the city, venting pressure like a pressure cooker, breeding mutant monsters with every vent. I had redecorated a planet's sky before ever setting foot on it. I bought a can of local cola and toasted the view. Getting around was a con man's holiday. I mimicked a Skrull face, shredded my clothes into refugee chic, lay on a highway shoulder, and groaned for help at the passing hovercars. Every single car's mandatory assistance system pinged its owner. Person in distress ahead? Stop. Every single owner pressed no. A dozen cars in half an hour, a dozen no's. First lesson in local politics, absorbed at ground level. This was the Blazing Sun Empire, the hard right superpower, where compassion is a tax and nobody here pays taxes. Fine. Localization is my specialty. I crawled off, forged a fist-sized nugget out of my gold reserves and desert sand, crawled back and upgraded the bait from a dying stranger to a dying stranger clutching a kilogram of gold. Screeching brakes inside 2 minutes. 2 large gentlemen in gym wear jumped out, stepped over my dying body without a glance, and picked up the nugget. It's real, brother! Hey! The second one pressed a laser pistol to my forehead, which in context was practically a welcome basket. Where'd you get this, kid? I coughed out a tale about a gang shootout 2 kilometers off-road, 2 more crates of gold, sole survivor, please don't kill me. They loaded me into their car with the tenderness people reserve for treasure maps, drove me out to the empty coordinates, realized there were no crates, and turned around to express disappointment, and by then I was behind them and the mind control orbs were already flying. Good Samaritans they were not, so my conscience filed 0 complaints about acquiring a chauffeur service. One of them was named Xylos, which translates to preserved egg, and no force in 2 galaxies was going to stop me from calling him preserved egg. He objected once. Master, it's pronounced. I looked at him. Preserved egg is fine, said preserved egg. The drive across the blazing sun borderlands was my first real look at the enemy's home, and the enemy's home was watching television. Preserved egg's sister-in-law flipped the car's screen to the disaster channel for me. Around-the-clock coverage of the Trina catastrophe. Evacuation grids, psionic overload wards, calamity-grade monsters sighted in Block D4. And I sat there with a cola and a slowly spreading warmth as I realized I was watching my own handiwork's ongoing news cycle. Tens of thousands of Skrulls with overload syndrome, a capital in triage. Their expedition against my planet, bleeding logistics from a wound I dealt via forklift. I said, toasting the screen. Retribution. And the Skrulls in the car agreed enthusiastically with their master's wisdom, without knowing what they were agreeing to, which is the purest form of agreement there is. They also tried to feed me. Freshly squeezed like worm juice, thick, green, moving slightly, offered with genuine hospitality. I threatened capital punishment if it ever approached my cup holder again, and I want to be honest, of everything I did on that planet, this is the threat I meant most sincerely. In the border town of Red Forest, I ran my favorite play of the whole trip, and the town handed me the setup gift-wrapped. At the town gate, 5 thugs shook down our car for protection money because their boss, a gangster named Torvin, owed a fortune to the principal of the local psionic cultivation school over a scandal involving the principal's wife that I refused to detail on a family broadcast. I lent preserved egg a thread of my mana, and my chauffeur, to his own visible astonishment, punched 5 extortionists into low orbit and summoned their boss to a meeting with the air of a man who'd had a fortuitous encounter. Torvin arrived alone, armed, and terrified of the wrong things. 1 orb later he was mine, and I had his grievance, his 200 goons, and my play. That night, dosed with mana-laced potions that swelled them into red-eyed strongmen, Torvin's entire gang robbed the psionic cultivation school, warehouse, library, the principal's mansion, the board members' villas, everything that wasn't mortared down, under one strict order: nobody dies. Not 1 death, barely a concussion. The town woke up to the most polite armed robbery in Imperial history, and the police, finding a gang boss with a public grudge and a fresh debt, wrote it up as revenge, exactly as designed, gave it a shrug, and moved on. Nobody, not the police, not the papers, not the Empire, noticed what was actually missing from the library's core exhibit room. The textbooks, complete cultivation techniques, tiers 1 through 4, all 4 Skrull professions, the systematic training method our drought-starved planet lost 10,000 years ago, the 20 million in psionic canisters, the tungsten mech, the potions, all of that was garnish. The syllabus was the heist. Somewhere on Blue Star, 100 million future soldiers were about to inherit their enemy's homework, and the enemy's newspapers were covering a love triangle. Then I crossed the border into the Lunkett Alliance, the left-wing superpower, and my recruiting method there deserves its asterisk. In a back alley of the border town, I found my local fixer mid-crime. A knife thug named Blake, robbing a woman of the $50,000 she'd just withdrawn for her son's medical treatment, and escalating toward worse when she wouldn't let go of the bag. I mind-controlled him off her mid-stab, put the woman gently to sleep, and had a look at my new employee's finances. 20-something in his pockets, total. His boss, Owen, had $210,000 in savings, so under new management, the firm made some structural adjustments. $30,000 of Owen's savings went to the robbed woman with a formal apology, delivered by a very confused Blake, who returned carrying a thank-you basket of fruit she'd insisted on, grown herself. The fruit was excellent. The thug, when I asked his thoughts, opined that we should have robbed her of the other 50 as well, and I patted his shoulder, told him to be a good person in his next life, and filed his memory down to lint. Some employees don't survive the performance review. The rest of Owen's savings bought me the local necessities, and Owen got me the crown jewel before his own memory wipe. A genuine driver's license. Real registration, 3 hours. Gender listed, female. I stared at it. He showed me his own license, also female. Over half the country's men, he explained, register as female for the benefits package, and my new papers additionally certified me as an environmentalist, an animal rights advocate, and a vegan. At the first highway toll, the machine greeted me as Ms. Vance, waived my fee in the name of inclusivity, and issued a gift box of coupons in identity-affirming purple. Dawn Shard laughed so hard she pulled a muscle in a body made of starlight. I want to be clear that I kept that license. It's in a frame now. Some trophies you don't explain. The capital, Trina City, was the future wearing a bad conscience. 4,000-meter towers, a single pyramid block housing millions, hover cars at 500 an hour in stacked lanes, titanium mechs on cold fusion cruising dedicated sky corridors, their owners occasionally descending into the slums to dispense justice, satisfy the justice itch, and leave. And the slums themselves at the northern edge, kilometers of them, where the same civilization stored its spare people next to the garbage in case it ever needed either. I set up shop in the slums, naturally, controlled a gang lieutenant named Jasper, a man whose net worth was a debt and whose first act under my employ was offering me the gang's ticket fund. Tickets to what? To the sealed floating island, he explained. The government had fenced the disaster zone and was charging cultivators admission to farm the mutant monsters. 100,000 of their own dead downtown, and the crater had a box office. Don Shard laughed for a minute straight. I took the ticket money and Jasper's shopping list expanded. Electronics of every generation, hover cars new and antique, communication gear, everything a planet of stalled engineers back home could reverse engineer, bought in unremarkable lots through unremarkable hands. The Alliance knew I'd landed. Their sensors had caught the teleport signature on day one, and their manhunt was a comedy I got to watch from the inside because Don Shard had needled an astral beacon into their intelligence minister, and we had his eyes and ears around the clock. So I got to personally overhear the finest moment in counter-espionage history, their brand new headquarters AI refusing a direct order to track my vehicle, on the grounds that my registered identity was protected and vulnerable, and privacy is sacred, and an alien's life is also a life. My driver's license, my beautiful, ridiculous license, standing between me and a national intelligence apparatus like a purple shield. Minister Calder, one of the most powerful men on the planet, argued ethics with a chatbot for 10 full minutes on my behalf without knowing it, lost, uninstalled it, and rolled back to an older AI, which obeyed instantly, and then, when complimented, admitted its predecessor got replaced for accidentally telling the truth. The truth being that its every polite response was a lie. I nearly blew my cover laughing in an alley. When they finally traced Jasper's shopping patterns anyway, 6 Saint Domain experts descended on the slums and grid-searched for 2 days. I stood invisible in a tenement stairwell for most of it, living off mana potions, close enough to hear them fly past complaining about overtime, close enough that on the last evening, all 6 of them held their "we give up" meeting directly above my roof. Calder sighed that I'd probably left the slums days ago. The other 5 agreed with him at a speed that told you everything about their overtime situation. They gave up. And their speaker, a man named Theron with an election coming, did not. Theron solved the problem of one hidden fugitive the way only a certain kind of politician can. The city's 4,000-meter Trina skyscraper opened a golden eye at its crown and fired a beam that erased the slums. A crater kilometers wide. 100,000 of his own citizens, the poorest he had, gone in a flash. Because the slums voted for his opposition anyway, and he said that part out loud, to his own minister, like a weather remark. I survived by 50 seconds. The beacon in Calder's collar relayed the emergency meeting live, the agents connecting Jasper's purchases to me, Calder rising to scramble his teams, and then Theron's projections smiling and saying no need, he'd send me a grand gift, and pressing something. 50 seconds of sprinting later, the sky behind us turned to noon, and the shockwave threw dust over half the city. Even his own people gagged on it. Through my cat's beacon, I listened to Calder, the man hunting me, shout at his head of state that there were millions in those blocks, and I listened to Theron answer, voice smooth as a brochure, that it was trash population anyway, a waste of resources, and that the slums voted for his opposition, so really, the ledger balanced nicely for the election. I memorized that exchange word for word. I wanted the phrasing exact for later, and there was going to be a later. His own hunting dog went quiet on the channel after that. Even the wolves were embarrassed. I stood in a back alley with the mushroom cloud rising over 100,000 murdered civilians, including Jasper, who'd spent 4 days fetching my groceries for the privilege of being vaporized as collateral, and I stopped being a tourist. Don Shard looked at my face and asked, carefully, which plan we were on now. 3, I said. We're on Plan 3. Plan 3 was the sealed floating island, the pressure cooker their god was babysitting north of the city. The plan was to open it. The walk north was through a city coming apart at its seams, streets emptied by panic in one district, business as usual 2 blocks later, and the closer we got to the seal, the more the local wildlife stopped being wildlife. I watched a lightning rat the size of a delivery van leap between rooftops, fur crackling faint purple, claws already stained, one of the vented monsters the government's containment plan had priced as an attraction rather than a problem. It never sensed us. Nothing did. We ghosted through the whole menagerie. And we walked in past the ticket booths, because yes, their government sold admission tickets to the disaster site so cultivators could farm the vented monsters. 100,000 down and a gift shop at the crater, and I've stopped being surprised by anything with a budget line. I did not pay admission. Small victories accumulate. At the barrier, we did the arithmetic out loud one last time. Their Tier 8 god, Cathar, lived on a mountain 56 kilometers west and flew at 2 kilometers a second. 28 seconds of flight, plus reaction time. Call it half a minute between the first loud noise and a god's arrival. Our demolition estimate, 15 seconds of charge, 1 second of boom. The margin was the width of a held breath, and we spent 1 more second agreeing we were doing it anyway. Then we transformed. Me into an adult blue dragon, courtesy of Scotty's heart, 40 meters of spellcasting apparatus with wings. Dawn Shard into her true combat form, a Starcore dragon, 30 meters of night sky wearing scales. 2 dragons materializing out of empty air beside a national hazard is the kind of thing that empties a fairground, and the ticket-paying cultivators around the barrier achieved speeds their tiers should not have allowed. Dawn Shard opened with Star Rainbow Focus, and here's the joke of that skill. It's garbage. A light spot that absorbs 15 seconds of your damage, then detonates for double. Useless in real fights because anything alive dodges, or shields at second 14, or simply kills you during your polite 15-second windup. She'd never once used it in combat. A sealed barrier does not dodge. A sealed barrier is the one opponent in the universe that stands there. We poured everything into the spot. Her full burst kit, Streams of Starfire, my 2 forbidden spells, Absolute Zero to soak the region in ice affinity, Cold Abyss on top of it. Then, per a lovely Icefire theory book from the Silver Pine Library, I alternated elements, each ice spell superheating the air for the fire spell behind it. A phoenix the size of a chapel dove into the same glowing point. Spell casting as thermodynamics abuse. The light spot swelled from ping-pong ball to ballroom. The local Saint-Domain experts scrambled up to stop us at second 6, which was rude but fair, and got the full warehouse. The glued village sword swung itself through their ranks, stunning them in 3s. Starfall landed on the ones who resisted the stun. The moon god Phantom escorted the persistent to the ground. Nobody died who didn't insist. At second 13, a red star rose on the western horizon. Cathar, early. His opening attack arrived from 20 kilometers out, a mind spike faster than sound and aimed through my skull, and my Hearthstone still had half a second left on its cast. Dawn Shard saved my life with a nut, the golden walnut, Dave's housewarming gift, the joke in my inventory for an entire war, hurled into the spike's path. Mental attacks die on their first target. The nut absorbed a god's lance and burst into confetti. The last half-second ticked, and I shouted my forwarding address to a quarter of the city, 60% taunt, 40% farewell, as the Hearthstone yanked me across 1,000 kilometers. Behind us, the light spot finished counting. The barrier cracked like an egg against the rim of a bowl, and the floating island detonated for the second time in 1 calendar year. The blast swallowed a dozen blocks of monsters, ticket booths, and cultivators who'd paid admission to be near it. I felt the shockwave catch up to my teleport wake as a shove between my shoulder blades, a full second after I'd landed 1,000 kilometers away. Which is not physics, which is emphasis. And the timing. I want to stress that I did not plan the timing this well. The timing was divine. Speaker Theron was at that exact moment on live television, mid-victory lap, assuring the press that number 1 had been successfully eliminated in a precision strike, fielding a question about the 100,000 dead with the phrase, a necessary sacrifice the ordinary people were honored to make. When 2 dragon roars rolled in from the north and his own skyline grew a second sun behind the podium. The cameras caught his face doing the full journey from statesman to man watching his re-election detonate. That clip, I'm told, is now the most replayed frame of video in Skrull broadcast history. You're welcome, Skrull Star. Invoice pending. The Alliance put a 100 billion bounty on my head, announced by a speaker with a visible eye twitch, and I confess I screenshotted my own wanted poster. Then the rival superpower saved my life out of pure pettiness, and I got the story later from Whitman's intel people and made them tell it to me twice. Cathar, chasing my Hearthstone's spatial wake, crossed into Blazing Sun territory uninvited, and their god, Zarthus, materialized above him in a silver mecha to ask, with the warmth of a border guard, whether one small tier 6 fugitive really required a god trespassing on sovereign soil. Cathar asked for pursuit rights. Of course, said Zarthus, not. Then he flew home and slapped a 70% income tax on my bounty for any Blazing Sun citizen who collected it, purely to spite his colleague, instantly deleting an entire nation's interest in hunting me. The 2 superpowers spent the week I needed most, locked in a planetary flame war about jurisdiction, incompetence, and who had been toyed with by one blue star human 3 separate times, a phrase from the Blazing Sun Foreign Ministry's official statement that I have considered putting on business cards. I could not have bribed them into a more useful stupidity, and I didn't have to. Their politics did it for free. And what were my 2 senior colleagues doing during all this? Glad you asked, because their status reports are my favorite thing in this entire story. Lao Cheng, founder of the Ming dynasty, had infiltrated a feudal kingdom called Makaton, replaced their 3rd prince, and was cultivating in the royal family's private psionic lake, an underground cavern of pure liquid spirit energy, imperial aura, and golden flood dragons coiling around him while he meditated, right up until his disguise slipped from sheer cultivation joy. His palace attendant brought him steamed worm lunches daily, updated him on palace gossip, and reminded him warmly that once his highness broke through, the marriage to the neighboring empire's princess could proceed, and Lao Cheng, a man who built the Ming from a begging bowl, said, just a little more cultivation first, like a teenager buying time on homework. He was considering not coming home at all. He said the spirit energy was better here. The founder of the Ming, contemplating emigration for the amenities. Chancellor Cao had gone further. The Chancellor was on the savage continent, disguised as a purple electric mouse, a Pikachu, commanding an army of actual Pikachus in territorial wars against silver wolves, while following Donna's lazy loot box treasure map, history's most feared warlord, at rodent scale, winning. I, meanwhile, took the diplomatic route. Baker Country, the planet's 3rd power, whose people opposed the invasion of Blue Star, and whose opposition party, the Anti-Alliance Organization, opposed the whole planetary government. I broke into the party leader's lakeside mansion, waited invisible until Anya Whitman came home from a diplomatic dinner, dinner and introduced myself telepathically at the exact moment he was romancing his wife toward the bedroom, which was an accident of timing I would apologize for if it hadn't been so effective. The man achieved instant sobriety. "I am number one," I said into his mind, "and I'm in your youngest son's bedroom. We should talk," which, in hindsight, ranks among the least reassuring sentences I have ever composed. He took the stairs 3 at a time. To his enormous credit, once he confirmed I hadn't come to harm his family, he straightened his tie and negotiated like the professional he was. We talked all night in his soundproof study. He tested me early. Why not just kill you for the 100 billion bounty? I asked him with what, exactly, his country of 0 god tiers planned to do the killing, and he conceded the audit with grace. Then I showed him the merchandise, and then the leverage, and then the future. The merchandise. A gold bar on his coffee table, 100 tons more where that came from, at half market price, sole buyer rights. The future. Within a year, I told him, Blue Star would field hundreds of Tier 7 legends and 3 to 5 god tiers, and one of the god tiers would be me, and countries that had traded with us early would be countries with very large friends. He looked politely skeptical of the timeline, so I put the Holy Silver Secret Court's invitation letter on the table, and the skepticism died of altitude sickness. The last Skrull admitted to that academy had been a crown prince 20 years ago, celebrated with a global broadcast. He stared at the letter like it might sing. By dawn, we had a pact. My gold funding his election war chest, his networks buying me technology and cultivation techniques, a standing covert trade line between his movement and my species, and one piece of unsolicited campaign consulting from me, free of charge. Put the alliance's slum casualties and plague victims on every screen in the country, and let the government's own record run his attack ads. He wrote it down. He won't credit me. Consultants never get credit. He served me worm juice as a courtesy. I served him a cola. He sipped it, considered, and described it as sweetened toilet cleaner with bubbles, but distinguished. I have not fully enjoyed a cola since, and I've decided that's his contribution to the war effort. 2 days later, he walked me through the goods, and the goods were an underground warehouse the size of a stadium floor. East Wing, hover cars from every era, from a 200-year-old museum piece under actual dust to the newest fusion models, one of each, per my specification, because engineers reverse engineer a technology's history, not its endpoint. West Wing, robots, military and domestic, ancient and current, racks of laser weapons. Communication gear by the crate. Power armor in 3 materials, and at the very back, from a hidden wall compartment, one brown briefcase worth more than everything else combined. Complete technical documentation for solar, fusion, anti-gravity, and laser technology, plus the national standard cultivation curriculum, tiers 1 through 4. Beyond 4, there's no standard method. Everyone's path differs. He apologized, as if the briefcase weren't already carrying our species across 2 centuries. The metals I'd brought didn't cover half of it. He'd quietly paid the difference himself and waved it off as making a friend on the first transaction. So I tipped him a homemade space ring, 3 cubic meters, a thing I'd crafted in 8 idle hours, and watched the leader of a planetary political movement nearly drop it. Space rings, it turns out, are worth a ton of gold apiece locally and can't be made here at all. "How many can your world produce?" he asked, with the eyes of a man seeing a trade route. "We'll take everything." My brain started drafting the Interstellar Handicrafts business plan mid-handshake. Mass production in 4 months. Backdoored, obviously. Every ring we export gets a remote detonation clause in the enchantment because I'm a businessman, not an idiot. You can take the man out of sales, but the quarterly projections follow you across the galaxy. Then Whitman's phone rang, and the whole planet tilted. A super artifact had surfaced on the savage continent. The Sword of 10,000 Admonitions, a weapon left behind 400 years ago by a stellar-level being. A class of power that makes Tier 8 gods look like county officials. Holding even a piece of it meant planet-level might. 10 of the world's 15 god-tier experts were already en route, and the seal on it had been broken, said the reports, by a small purple electric mouse. I put my face in my hands. The Chancellor, the treasure map. The lazy woman's loot box map had been pointing at a stellar weapon, and Dong Zhou had dug it up with paws. The inheritance trial spat out its verdict 2 days later in a 30-second video that broke Skrull internet. The footage was grainy, shot on some cultivator's antique recorder from a terrified distance, and it showed an elderly human, disguise burned away, white hair streaming, holding a broken sword hilt that bled cyan light. Across from him, Zarthus, the strongest being on the planet, in a mecha whose auxiliary materials alone cost trillions. The hilt's light sheared the mecha's left leg off like deli meat. The old man's whole body was shaking, plainly unable to hold the power he was channeling, face cycling from pale to burst vessel red, and he still drove a god backward twice before turning into a streak of cyan and vanishing over the horizon with 10 gods rising in pursuit. Chancellor Chao, Tier 6, fencing the planet's apex to a standstill on borrowed starlight and pure Three Kingdoms audacity. The man burned Wu Chao once with less. He was now the most wanted rodent in the galaxy, and somewhere in that fleeing streak of light, I guarantee you he was composing a poem about it. I couldn't help him outrun gods. But every god was on the savage continent, which meant one particular city, was standing there with its highest cards out of the deck. Dawn Shard, I said. How would you feel about going back to Trina? We planned it on the flight. 2 plans, lettered like a proper operation. Plan A, kill the speaker, and if Dawn Shard's senses caught anything tier 7 or above in range, activate the return pendant instantly. No heroics, no encores. Plan B, kill the speaker, and if the coast read clear of tier 7s, transform, go loud, and bill them for Jasper. She made me repeat Plan A's exit condition twice, which was fair, given my record, and then spent the rest of the flight asking what fighter jet meant, because Whitman had gifted us one, and she wanted to know if it was food. Before Trina, one detour that wasn't tactical. I flew us to a small town called Bale, 73 kilometers off the capital road, and set my Hearthstone anchor on an empty field outside it. Dawn Shard asked why here, of all the fields on the planet, because of a name from my past life. Frozen Dark Brew. You met him on my first leaderboard, level 7 when I was 10. In the history I came from, he grew into one of humanity's legendary blades, crossed a Skrull star as a pioneer, and died in this town at 19, surrounded, alone, buying time for intel that saved millions he never met. There's no marker. The locals never knew what happened in their streets. I stood in the field for a minute with my hand on the anchor stone, and I didn't make a speech either, because he'd have hated one at 19, and he never got older. The anchor stayed at Bale, partly tribute, mostly a working reminder, set exactly where overconfidence goes to die. However smooth this trip feels, this planet kills better men than me. Check your exits. Then I flew us on to the capital with the sentimentality stowed and the paranoia lit. 8 hours across the continent on back routes, Dawn Shard chaining acceleration spells on me and refueling my mana from her starlight tree form at rest stops, and we arrived at Trinea with the enemy capital's guardian still a continent away chasing a purple mouse. In a forest outside the city, she pulled up the live broadcast on her phone. Speaker Theron was holding another press conference. The man lived at podiums the way other men live in houses. This one was about the artifact, all confidence and race destiny, the Skrulls as rightful masters of the coming age. And when a nervous reporter asked whether the elusive number 1 might interfere, Theron smiled his campaign smile and said I was merely tier 6 and would certainly never dare show my face. I want it noted that I was already inside the hall when he said it, invisible, 20 meters from the podium, holding a scroll. There's a special flavor of joy in being underestimated in real time, at a podium, on camera, while you stand close enough to count the speaker's pores. My opening bid was Clara's summoning scroll. She materialized in the corner of the hall in a bloom of golden light, confused, unarmored, mid-vacation, and I owe her forever for the half-second of pure, betrayed bewilderment on her face, because the scroll's construct did exactly what I'd calculated. 4 Skrull leaders shared that podium, the speaker, his deputy, the intelligence minister, the secretary of state, each a tier 5 or 6 with a lifetime's hidden trump card. They saw a tier 6 human materialize out of folded space, and every one of them panicked in the same direction. A cold fusion gauntlet laser, a month's charged mental lance, 2 relic artifacts unwrapped for the first time in decades. All of it into Clara. The construct burst like a golden bubble, unharmed in any way that mattered, her real self blinking on a beach 2 worlds away. And their trump cards were now smoke, and their eyes were now pointed at where the threat had been, and their hindbrains were just beginning to assemble the sentence, "Who summons a decoy?" when I answered it from behind the speaker's chair. The echo of the ghost cat, a consumable from Clara's coma dungeon, charges regrown by months of us studying and wargaming side by side, delivering one effect, a phantom cat's pounce for 100% of the target's health in true damage, ignores shields, ignores damage reduction, ignores the small gray artifact sphere Theron crushed in his fist at the last instant, whose life-saving barrier bloomed around him in full, and through which the ghost cat's claws passed like the barrier was a rumor. 2 cats, 2 pounces. Speaker Theron, the man who lasered 100,000 of his own voters into a budget line, died mid-gasp inside his own useless shield, and his deputy went with him, and neither of them managed to close their eyes, which their faces spent eternity being surprised about. The intelligence minister Calder, faster than his masters, got his staff up and a month's charged counterspell rising, and I put Cold Abyss through his defenses and left him as the world's most detailed ice sculpture, expression preserved, for the historians. Dawn Shard's breath handled the propaganda corps, and I'll note for the tribunal that every journalist in that room had bylines on the Slum Massacre coverage titled things like, "Unnecessary Light." Then the city's 4,000-meter tower opened its golden eye one more time, the disintegration ray, their doomsday card, a gift technology from the Holy Silver Federation itself, and there was no plan for it, no clever item, no timing trick, because I didn't know it could fire twice that fast, and it was already firing. Dawn Shard blinked into the beam, not shoved, not caught by accident. She teleported herself between me and it, 30 meters of Star Dragon, and the ray took her apart into molecules while I watched. The remainder of the beam still atomized half my right side. I fell out of the sky with my ears full of my own pulse, activated the return pendant with the arm that still existed, and the last thing I gave Trina City was blood on their wind. She wasn't gone, 10 lives. She'd wake in the game world in 6 days, and knowing her, complained that dying interrupted a download. But I materialized on Donna's basement floor in a lake of my own blood, and the thought I lost consciousness holding wasn't about bounties or artifacts. It was. The cat took a god-killer beam for me, and I never even let her win an argument. Ling Tao had been standing watch at that basement for 3 days, watching the return window shrink towards 0 with all 3 of us unaccounted for. What finally came through it was a sound like a dropped side of beef and a blood slit climbing the wall. Her after-action report describes the next minute as composed. Her sprint up the stairs to wake the alien, I'm told, set a building record. Donna healed me with the bedside manner of a mechanic. Disintegration ray wounds? My junior did something extraordinary, she said, mildly impressed, regrowing my arm like she was buttering toast. I slept 10 hours as her official body pillow, a duty I performed unconscious, which she rated acceptable. The state gave me the June 1st medal, the United Government's first ever decoration, named for the invasion date and sounding exactly like a children's holiday, and I will treasure it and never say its name aloud. My chest camera footage went out to the world, edited by Ling Tao personally, through one sleepless night, into a 40-minute cut titled with my name and the phrase, 240 hours of life and death, and the species lost its collective mind in 3 distinct stages, which the forum itself documented. What people thought opening the video, watching the video, and finishing the video, all 3 stages being the same word at different pitches. For 10 days, the world had wondered where its #1 player vanished to. The answer, it turned out, was to the enemy's home planet, to rob their schools, detonate their crown jewel twice, execute their head of state on camera, and come home with their entire technological curriculum in a necklace. The alien scenery alone spawned 1,000 research papers in a week. The speaker's podium clip hit 1 billion views. The clip of a small starlit cat stepping in front of a god-killer beam got more, and the comment sections under that one weren't jokes. Then the whole circus followed me onto the street. My first morning back in the capital, I unpacked a Skrull hovercar from my necklace in rush hour traffic, purely because Ling Tao's sports car felt like a donkey cart after a week at 500 an hour, and the boulevard recognized me in 8 seconds flat. Drivers abandoned their cars to take photos. A little girl in a red jacket demanded an autograph on her homework and addressed me devastatingly as Uncle. An actual uncle with a beer belly asked, with real municipal concern, whether an alien car could run without a local license plate, and I explained that my car doesn't run, it flies, and the police don't manage that yet. Then I popped the anti-gravity to a cheer, took Ling Tao up to 6 meters, and cleared the morning gridlock at 300 an hour while she made the noises fighter pilots make when they're off duty and honest. Humanity had needed a good week for 2 straight years. I was glad to cater one. The seniors missed the return window, both alive, both flourishing, one prince, one warlord mouse with a stellar hilt and 10 gods behind him, and Donna, pleased with her souvenir pearl powder and tail rings, agreed to open the next portal in a month, 6 seats this time. A rescue mission with expanded capacity. I started the roster in my head before she finished the sentence, and then her academy's dean dropped by, and the ceiling of my universe moved. The dean of the Holy Silver Secret Court, a stellar-level being, one of maybe 20 in a federation that governs civilizations, stepped out of a portal into a suburban villa because he'd heard someone badmouth his sword's name. The sword of 10,000 admonitions was his, it turned out, split in 2 ages ago. The hilt gifted to the electric mouse race so the little idiots would survive natural selection, which means Chancellor Cao is currently being hunted across a planet for stealing the emotional support weapon of the most powerful entity I have ever been in a room with. The dean polymorphed Donna's brother into a sheep for laughing at his naming sense and sentenced him to 3 days without sleep, which for their species is a war crime. Then he stopped in front of me, looked at me the way you look at a word you can't quite remember. Human, he said, I smell destiny on you, something like a seed of the universe. I asked what that meant. He said I couldn't understand the answer yet, the way a flat drawing can't understand the hand, and told me to ask again when I reached planet level, when, not if, and stepped back through his portal to go feed his Pikachus. A seed of the universe. Filed in the warehouse, top shelf, behind glass, next to the framed license that says Ms. Vance. Home held one more door blown open. I flew up toward my 9th floor window, and my senses snagged on something impossible. A presence inside my apartment. Familiar. Frowning at a book. Clara was on my couch. The real her. In my world, in my terrible rental lighting, reading one of my paperbacks with the expression of a marshal reviewing a subordinate's sloppy reports. She'd felt me coming before I felt her, and was already at the window waving down like this was normal. Like crossing the wall between worlds was a thing people did to return a visit. It was now. Her ancestors' administrator privileges had propagated. As my territory's gold-tier talent, summoned once across the wall, she could commute. 10 resurrection lives, 1 crossing per day on my side's clock. The first game-born ally with a standing visa to Earth, standing in my kitchen asking, genuinely curious, why my world kept its lightning in the walls. She'd already made her decision before I could make my pitch. World tour postponed. Training resumed. Because in 1 month, when the portal reopened with 6 seats, she was coming to Skrulls with me and, direct quote, delivered while poking me in the sternum, "You clearly cannot be trusted there alone. You came back as mostly soup." She also delivered a message before she crossed back, and the message was the real weight in the room. Lirea Flo wanted to see me, in person. Qingfeng Village, the novice town built on her own sleeping body, something very important to discuss. A goddess, a time-space administrator, summoning me by name to the graveyard she wears as a body. Whatever she wants, it isn't small, and I haven't gone yet, and it sits in my chest like a held breath, because the war doesn't pause for auditions with gods. I logged back into the game, 10 days offline being 4 game months, and spawned into the smoking ruins of Malachi's Manor, with my friends list detonating in greetings, and the horizon full of artillery weather. Haiyan City had become a 3-empire meat grinder, gold banners against blue against green, warships trading broadsides off the coast, 30 high-tier experts tangled in a knot above the rooftops. Our side's player commander, of all people in 2 lifetimes, was the guild leader of Muyun, my old company. The corporation whose sales floor I'd escaped was now taking my flanking suggestions. I chose to find this healing. The enemy's play arrived on schedule. Rhiannon, the Ryan Empire's Legion Archmage, peak tier 6, 4 elements, opening a 20-meter portal in the sky to summon her arcane battleship, the Sea Sovereign, 42 arcane cannons that had already deleted one of our armies earlier that week. Our commander screamed scatter orders. I chose Rude instead. Blue dragon form, full spell speed, and I hit her mid-incantation with everything that interrupts. Counterspell, spatial imprisonment, a mind blast through Kalen's fragment as seasoning. Her portal shattered like dropped glassware, the half-summoned battleship's prow dissolving mid-materialization, and Rhiannon coughed blood on her own backlash and fled to the fleet. The 42 cannons went back into storage unfired. Then I did what I'd actually come for and farmed. 22,000 merit off their elite lines in an afternoon, Starfall and Phoenix Descent on rotation, because Clara's blood doesn't buy itself, and there were 300 and some drops still in that quartermaster's vault. Home news reached me between spell rotations. A Puxie's promotion siege to Intermediate City was scheduled and oversubscribed. 3 Saints of the Scholar Sanctuary leading the defense as a courtesy to their landlord, players celebrating in the streets during the Monster Wave intermissions. The promotion would unlock 3 more Mage Tower class building slots, and the relevant department had bought out the lot at national budget prices. 1 slot went, through channels and paperwork and what I can only assume was sheer gremlin persistence, to Azure Wyvern. She informed me she would now be burning materials to power like me, quote, "so catch up." The number 2 player on the planet telling me to catch up. I taught her that arrogance. I've never been prouder of a monster. That's where the arrow found me. 1 arrow, wrapped in black mist, from beyond the horizon. It crossed the sky like a subtraction sign and took a third of my boss template health through a dragon's wing, stapled a dozen curses to my bloodstream, and dropped me out of the air into the rubble of a street I'd been winning on. She descended through her own black mist with a longbow and a smile that had outlived its face. Lyra, the Banshee Queen, the enemy empire's tier 7 legend, the one archer in this world whose name I'd hope to meet later, with more levels, with more items, with a plan. The otherworld adventurer, vengeance, she said, drifting closer, the mist reaching for my head with fingers in it. Come, let me see what good things are hidden in your soul. Here's what I know that she doesn't. I know I have died once already, and the universe blinked first. I know a goddess is holding a door open for me. A stellar dean has my scent. An empress owes me her crown. A marshal keeps a badge that finds me across worlds. And a cat with 8 lives left is going to wake up in 6 days absolutely furious that I started this fight without her. The queen wants to see what's hidden in my soul. Honestly, let her look. There's a whole warehouse in there, and everything in it goes off.